Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the special open council meeting for April 25th. This meeting, due to statutory requirements with respect to bylaws, is a special council meeting as opposed to being a committee of the whole. Can we have late items, please? Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Worship. There are a number of addendums on the addendum that was published on Friday. The 2016 property rates bylaw, there's a new appendix to replace the existing one. Under 7E, results of investigation for a public boat launch, we have a delegation from Mr. Fred Taylor. And then we have Regional Parks and Trails parcel tax bylaw. There's an additional staff information report and a delegation from Ms. Denise Bryce, and we are suggesting that it be relocated to 7B earlier on the agenda. In addition, under 9A, parcel tax bylaw be adopted, and that's an addition. And item 7G, which is not on the addendum, but on the original agenda that was published, is the Syrian refugee employment, and that one is being pulled from this evening's agenda.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended? Councillor Bestwick, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kipp. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, can we have the motion for the adoption of the minutes of the previous meetings? There are
no minutes this evening, Your Worship.
Then why do I have that?
There must be some hanging on it.
You're just keen.
Do I have that as item number 4? Anyway, next item. Presentations. Mr. Dale Lindsay, Director of Community Development, to provide a presentation regarding Community Development 2015 year-end review.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to take a few moments this evening and just run over our 2015 development stats with Council. This is something we like to do every year. We're probably a little bit later in the year than we normally like to get in front of you, but just given other priorities this year, we're running a little behind. I'll run through quickly. If Council has questions, I'm certainly happy to take them through the presentation. So in 2015, there was 321 new single-family dwelling permits issued in the city of Nanaimo. And I've included here stats going back for the last decade. You can see on a typical year, we're averaging just below 300 dwelling units. So we're running above average in 2015. We often get the question of how many of our homes now contain secondary suites. So since 2005, of course, we've allowed secondary suites in the community. The number rose steadily from the time we first legalized these units. It peaked out of just above 60%. And then in the last few years, we've seen it come back down closer to 50%. And in 2015, we landed right on the 50% mark. So in addition to those 321 new dwelling units that we have about 160 secondary suites were added to the housing stock in the community just in those new homes. Of course, single family only tells part of the story. Overall, if you look at all residential housing types, we had permits for just over 1,000 units issued last year. So 321 single family, 368 multi, and 263 secondary suites in total. That would be in new dwelling units and in existing dwelling units. If you add those three up, they do not equal 1,011 because there's some other smaller categories like mobile homes, ancillary or accessory dwellings, in commercial buildings, but those are the three main categories we see in the community. What I would note is that you see the blue line there being multifamily, the green being single family. In the last couple of years, we've had more multifamily units created than single family. The community is still approximately 60-40 split, single family, multifamily, but we're certainly seeing a trend in more units, multifamily, which I think is going to slowly bring us towards that 50-50 split in the community. The other question we often get is, well, where? Where are these new units being built in the community? And what I have here for you is a series of slides over the time frame of 2015, working through the months. A red dot represents one single-family housing start. A blue is a multi-family housing start, which could have multiple units. So what you're going to quickly see here is that the answer to the question is it's everywhere. We've had a specific focus on infill throughout the community, and we're now seeing residential developments from the north end to the south. There is no clear area. There's no clear north versus the south. It's literally in all parts of the community. Our developments don't tend to be extremely large, but rather smaller to medium-sized infill residential projects. So that's the 2015 at complete build-out. I have here just to reinforce the statement is there's the 2014. If you applied the same approach, you would see an equal distribution throughout the community of housing starts. The other measure of activity in the community is what we call construction value. And I've included here the 4 main categories of how we calculate construction value. The bottom line being 2015. I apologize, there's lots of numbers there. I bring your attention to the one on the bottom right. So overall in 2015, we had just over $200 million in construction value. By far and away, the largest category is residential, almost $160 million, followed by commercial, $40 million. Public institutional, just under $5 million, and industrial, just under $3 million. And I have the previous years there for comparison. I think Mr. Jackson distributed to you notes, screenshots of this presentation, so you certainly have that information, and we'll make sure it's distributed. If you look at the construction value overall, so the total is the dash red line at the top. The blue line is residential, and you'll see relatively consistently over the last 10 years, you've kind of had commercial, public, institutional, industrial run within, relatively same construction volume value results. What you see is a much larger fluctuation in that residential, in that blue line. Still residential far and away outpaces the other types of development in our community. Of that value, that $200 million that I talked about that happened in 2015, I just wanted to give you a few examples of projects that did occur in that calendar year. We had the project on Tulsa Road, which the building permit was issued for, just over $3.5 million. This was a 38-unit condominium project. Up on McRobb, just off of Uplands, we had a purpose-built rental building, which was approximately 50 units, again with a construction value of just over $3.5 million. We have just across from Rutherford Mall and next to the Workers' Compensation Board, there's a new project going in called the Nanaimo Memory Care. These are actually photos from the site that's currently under development. Just under $9 million construction value for that project. That is a 79-unit private care facility. Woodgrove Mall renos. Anybody that's been to the mall recently knows that there's a complete renovation on the interior of the mall underway. That had a construction value of just under $12 million. And our largest project issued in 2015 was the work underway on Northfield Road in association with the Nanaimo Travelers Lodge. Construction value of just over $17 million. And that's for a 130-bed care facility. The other thing we look at when we talk about development in the community is the subdivision activity. We had 36 subdivision applications approved in 2015, which resulted in 178 new single-family lots. I would also point out, though, that we have what we call PLA applications, preliminary layout approval. So those are subdivisions which are in stream and have some level of approval. If you added up all of those active PLAs, there's another 1,000 lots that are on the books that are able to come forward for final. Through subdivision process, under the legislation, a community can take up to 5% of the land on subdivisions that are greater than 3 lots. In Nanaimo, we take the 5% minimum. Because of the scale of some of our subdivisions, we end up taking cash in lieu. So if you take 5% of a small 4-lot subdivision, the size of the parcel you would be getting would be so small as probably not to be usable as park space. So we may take that as cash in lieu. Overall, in 2015, this resulted in about 9.6 hectares of new park in the community and just under $100,000 of cash in lieu of park. In total DCCs, and it's important to remember there's actually 6 DCC bylaws that are applicable in the community. We collect for sanitary, drainage, water distribution, roads, water supply, and we also collect on behalf of the RDN for sanitary. So from 2015, if you added all development types together, so this would be all new single-family lots, all multifamily commercial construction, new multifamily commercial construction, our DCCs total were just over $5 million. And just to give you some comparison, I included the last 4 years of DCCs there. Of course, with new development, developers are responsible for creating new infrastructure for us. But once it's created, it's handed over to the city, and it then becomes our asset to maintain. So in 2015, through our development approvals, we had about 8,000 meters of new servicing lines, so that would be water and sewer and drainage, 13 new fire hydrants, 4,300 meters, just over 4 kilometers of new sidewalk, 69 street lights, and just over 1.5 kilometers of new road. So those numbers I've been talking about sort of give you a glimpse of what happened in 2015. Part of what we do to look forward in terms of what do we expect to see coming down the pike is looking at our rezonings and development permits in that year, because that often helps get you an understanding of what's going to come forward as a building permit then in 2016. Overall, we see 21 rezoning applications, 56 development permits, which is very close to the average over the last 5 years. But what I would note is if you look at all of those development permits, they come out to about 850 units on the books, where the average over the last 5 years is 513. So it remains to be seen if those will all translate into building permits in 2016, but it's certainly one indication as we look forward. Of the 56 development permits that were approved in 2015, we had 12 that were aquatic, 8 were commercial, 11 industrial, 6 institutional, 4 mixed use, 13 multifamily, and 2 steep slopes. So a very wide variety of development permit types. And I'm missing one slide. I was also going to talk to you about development variance permits. We had 19 applications to the Board of Variance in 2015. 14 of those were approved. 5 of them were ultimately denied by the board. We have also our development variance permits, which come forward to council. We had 30 applications received in 2015. We have 24 of those were approved, and the rest were either withdrawn or remain in process at this time. So, Your Worship, that was the end of my presentation, unless there's questions from council.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Good statistics to know. Imagine if we all got along, how much we'd get accomplished. It's funny. One question on the infrastructure. Did the pricing for 2015 include any of the infrastructure for the new water treatment plant?
Your Worship, are we talking about the development cost charges, or we're talking about...
Yeah, because we have to pay development cost charges on that project. Does that include it?
So the water treatment plant itself is outside the city boundaries, so we wouldn't collect development cost charges on that, nor would there be any...
But it's included in the infrastructure value you had there.
Again, those infrastructure numbers I had in terms of kilometers of road, the street lights, there would be nothing associated with that project because it would be outside the city. So those would all be projects, subdivisions, or developments which occur within city boundaries.
Okay, so if I can follow up, then I'm still trying to get that. So in the construction value page where it says industrial, that wouldn't be included. When you looked at the major projects, the largest project based on construction value, there's no star for that.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I assume that'll show up on the RDN's building permits and development stats as one of their largest projects, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Dale. Excellent presentation. Appreciate it. I have a few questions. The 1,000+ single families and the multi and the suites, Is there a graph in here that will provide for me how that compares to previous years and what we're forecasting? I know that you mentioned it in there, but I don't know if I, without trying to get my magnifying glass out here on these little photos, it just is what it is, but how does it compare with the previous, say, couple of years, and what are we looking at in the next couple of years?
Thank you. No, there is not a slide. I can certainly get you the background information, sort of the last 5 or 10 years. The number, if you look at traditionally single-family and multifamily combined, 700 units is sort of the typical number we've seen in Nanaimo in the last decade, on average. So, of course, there's years where it's higher, years it's lower, but on average about 700 units. Going ahead, we're still forecasting growth to be around the 1 to 1.2%, which is in keeping with sort of provincial growth. So our overall numbers, we believe, for 2016 will be very close to what we saw in 2015. And if we look at Q1 in 2016, it's very comparable in terms of overall unit count and construction value as to what we saw in the first quarter of 2015.
Thank you. Next question, please. The average turnaround time for building permits, are we tracking that year over year so that we know if we're sort of doing a good job, and I'm not sure how you classify or categorize a good job, but I know that we're doing a good job. I'm just wondering if we're on target with what our expectations are.
Absolutely. I guess it's important to talk about we have different types of building permits. We measure single family differently than we would measure a large scale commercial multifamily. Our targets for single family building permits are 3 weeks. That has been our target for a number of years. I believe in 2015 we were slightly above that. I think we were closer to 3.5 or 4 weeks overall for the year.
Okay, thank you. Next question, if you'll indulge me. When projects start in 2015, and we're putting the monies into, so whatever, single family, 146 million, or whatever the number is, and then public, 4.6 million. If a project starts in 2015 and goes over into 2016 and maybe even into 2017, is the value of that project all allocated to the year that it was initiated, or is it spread out over the 12 or 16 or 18 months or however many months?
Sir, Worship, that's a good question. So the building permit is really is the trigger mechanism. So the year in which the building permit is issued is when we would record that construction value. The most significant thing that we use construction value for is determine the building permit fees. So those are established at the day the permit's issued. Development cost charges, on the other hand, are collected at the day the building permit is issued, but they are allowed to be paid in phases, in 3 separate phases. So DCCs may not all come to the city on the day the permit's issued. They can be spread out over 3 phases, which could extend into the next calendar year.
And the construction values don't necessarily happen in the year that the permit was issued either.
I think that's a good point. The project doesn't end, but for consistency purpose, we collect the data and represent it on the day that the building permit's issued. But that's absolutely correct. We could have a building permit issued late December. We would record the construction value at that time. Woodgrove Mall is a good example of that. In this past year, that was a very late in 2015, so that showed up in our 2015 stats. Of course, most of the work is occurring Q1 2016.
Thank you. Last question. When we speak to assets, and you talk to 13 more fire hydrants and some 1.6 kilometers more of whatever, pipe or roads or otherwise, where does the Collier spillway come in there? And that's number one. And number two, when we're doing intersections, or redoing intersections, for example, the Northfield and Island Highway, and we do a new train crossing, I know that's an old asset. I guess you could call it an asset. Do we call it a new asset when we put new arms in and new electronics and new everything? Is that every time we do a crossing now, that's going to become our expenditure and our asset?
Through your worship, absolutely, those are assets. What I was reporting on here tonight, though, I want to be clear, are just those assets that we obtained through development. So these are assets that a developer would have built either through a subdivision, or if they're responsible to do, frontage works and services as part of a commercial or multifamily project, they would have to do these assets. They pay for them. They then become ours. There's, of course, whole nother value in terms of assets the city does as part of its capital projects, whether they're new or renewal, that could result in new assets beyond which I'm reporting here tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. Thank you for the information. Very, very interesting. I had two questions related to your slide on subdivisions and park dedication. First one, Dale, you indicated sometimes with a very small subdivision, the 5% park allocation would not really be worthwhile taking for a park just because it would be too small. Mm-hmm. Would there ever be an opportunity of basically banking that and combining it with an adjacent small subdivision and putting the two together to make a worthwhile size park?
Absolutely, and that does happen. So if we think that there's a potential, there's subdivision potential on a neighboring property, we would factor that into our decision about where we think park should go. And if there's an opportunity to put it on the property line, so to speak, and then the opportunity and gain further parks through the developing of the balance of the lands, we would do that. And there's a number of examples where that has happened throughout the community for sure.
Good to know that long-term planning is happening. My second question, also related to that, when we take cash in lieu, is that cash in lieu earmarked for that specific area or subdivision, if you will, or does it just go into general funds?
It's earmarked specifically for the purchase of parkland, but not for an area. So it could be used anywhere in the community.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. Dale, can we go to the slide with the numbers, please, around each year? Because I've noticed a drastic change in industrial and commercial. Like last year, it was, in 2015, it was around $1 million plus, and the year before, it was around $7 million. Just a question I would have is...
I'm sorry, it's going to take me a second to get to that slide.
And the question I would have as we wait for that to populate is... just, I guess it's really out of city's control. Whoever wants a large development and large commercial or industrial projects in Nanaimo, would that be right? And it was 2014, I seen high numbers of projects, and I guess those would come to fruition last calendar year. With Councillor Bestwick, you sort of answered it. It may be on the 2014 books, but came to conclusion in 2015. It's not. Anyways, I think it's the next two slides from that one. That one. See where public was 17 mil. Yeah, it was more, and one was 7. So, would that, what, for example, would that be like maybe a hospital?
Yeah, and I think you need to be somewhat careful when you look at those numbers, because I was trying to show you with the 5, for example, that happened in 2015.
Yeah.
The difference between a low year and a high year in a category can be one project or 2 projects. So I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I don't remember what the project was in 2014 that would have resulted in that $17 million figure. I can certainly find that out and report back to council.
So,
but
or it could take one school, a VIU, something, or it could just drive the numbers
up. It could be a couple of projects, and you see that vary more widely in commercial and institutional projects than in residential.
In the commercial one, I see 60 million in 2014. Okay, so that was where I was just seeing what the difference was, and I seen a drastic decline, but you answered that. It could be just one project or 2 projects can make up that difference. Thank you.
Councillor Hahn.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale, for your presentation. Great info. The question I actually have, we were talking about the water treatment plant. So when the waste treatment plant comes on, do we get money from that?
Yes. In terms of, we would collect both building permit revenue for that project, development permit revenue, but also development cost charges, yes.
So 2016, 2017, whenever it comes on, that's going to be $70 million for that one project that's going to be on our public section?
It would likely show up as construction value under a public institutional, yes.
Yeah. So I guess Councillor Yoakum just left. That one project could probably skew the numbers a lot, right?
As I was thinking about Councillor Yoakum's question after, I think 2014, if I go back and look, you'll find that's the BC Hydro project on Madsen Road that reflects that high jump there. 2012, sorry. 2012 could very well be the City Hall building, yes. That would be a significant part of that, yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
Jumping back to the 5% parks cash in lieu, that's set by the province at 5%, is it not?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so that's a given. So that's the best we can do with that. Now, is that based on the assessed value of the land prior to the subdivision being approved, or after the subdivision's approved?
That's a very good point. If we're taking cash in lieu, it's based on the value before the land is subdivided. So it's present day value before the subdivision. So for that reason, we would almost always prefer to take land rather than the value of the property before, except in cases where the resulting land is so small, it's not rendered viable as a park space.
So, okay, so we would prefer to take land. So are we doing that? And that's not in here. You mentioned the amount of park, but
in the majority of cases, I would say we do take land. However, I would say we've kind of moved, Nanaimo's moved from a community where our typical subdivision size was 30, 40, 50 lots. We're now seeing a lot of smaller infill projects. And on those smaller infill projects, it makes less and less sense to take it as land. And even to the point where if you start doing subdivisions that are less, they're 3 lots or less, the legislation doesn't allow any park dedication. So I would just be mindful of that.
no, that makes sense. Thank you. What I'm not seeing here is the other one that we do, which is the community contribution, and how monies get into the Housing Legacy Reserve Fund. I believe there's a $1,000 per door thing with subdivisions, is there not?
Your Worship, not through subdivisions, but through rezoning. Anytime there's a rezoning on land, Council's policy for multifamily or for any door created is $1,000. So whether it's ultimately would be a single family unit or a multifamily unit, the current policy is $1,000. I don't have stats in front of me this evening on the amounts collected in 2015, but I can certainly get those for you.
Yep, no worries. Now, how long ago was it that we determined the $1,000 per door, and is there any chance we could increase that?
I think we talked about this last Monday night, if I recall, in the I think the request that came from the majority of council was to look at reviewing that policy, and if I recall, it was 2013, I believe, the last time it was reviewed.
Thank you.
Thank you. See no other questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. Next item, 2016 to 2020 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw.
I would move that council receive for information the report pertaining to the financial plan amendment bylaw 2016 number 722.01.
Do you have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hahn. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. Oh, Councillor Kipp.
I got to get in on this real quick. This is one of the most confidence I've had in a budget in a long time. And we talked about back in December at our council meeting, now again in April. I want people to understand that our zero increase this year is for the city part of the taxes. It's not the provincial. So there may be an increase in provincial or our regional tax for school boards and things. But I think this is really good. We've increased our asset funding another 1% for 2016 and 2017. Our next year's jump is a bit, it's 2.8%, but as people can see on the screen, but this is the most confidence I've had. And our accumulated surplus, page 8 of our agenda, is looking better after 2 years in some of our major projects. So, like I say, it's one of the most confidence I've had in voting for a budget in a long time.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
I'm just extremely impressed with the work that staff has done, the new city manager and council on working on this budget together. Councillor Kipp mentions the 2.8% increase in 2017. That was originally scheduled to be 4.1. So all of the increases over the next few years have dropped significantly you were looking at 4.1 in 2017, 3.2 in 2018, 2.1 in 2019, and so on. Yeah. So actually, when I went back, I actually got, they were higher than what was there. No, they weren't, so that's okay. I went and wrote all these down myself. And you had a picture. This guy's good. These guys are really good. So I think we should, really congratulate our staff and council on what we're doing here. It's phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Hong, you ready for the bylaws? Gotcha.
Financial Amendment Bylaw 2016 number 7222.01 to amend the 2016 to 2020 financial plan. Pass first reading.
And seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Brennan opposed. Thank you.
That the Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2016 number 7222.01 pass second reading.
Seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Thank you. Seeing no questions, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Please note Councillor Brennan opposed. Next.
That the Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2016 number 7222.01 pass third reading.
Seconded by Councillor Kipp. Thank you. Seeing no questions, call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Brennan.
So on the third reading, I will say why I am opposed to this budget. I don't think that this budget actually meets the needs of the city. I think that a budget that has no increase cannot possibly be meeting the needs given the inflation that we face on the island and in Nanaimo. Given that in years past, the 1% for the asset management was in addition to the previous year. We always added 1%. We have dipped into our reserves. I recognize that there are still reserves, but we have no policy on when we might use reserves, when we might borrow, or when we might go to the taxpayer for the funding. So for those reasons, I don't have the same kind of confidence as my colleagues do in this budget, and for those reasons, I'm voting against it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, from my perspective, I think Councillor Brennan is wrong on the infrastructure. I think we've added another 1%. Can staff respond for me? We were going 1% always. This is actually now 2% that we're putting aside. Am I correct?
We had 1% each year, including.
It's just 1% this year? Or is it another? So that's the same as normal. Okay, so nothing's cut there. So it's the same. And just spending more on a budget doesn't mean that we're falling behind. For me, the reason I like this is that we're looking at efficiencies. This is the core review we're going through, and we'll have a good report on that in the near future in May. And from my perspective, the reason I'm supporting it is the fact that we've become more efficient. We're doing more for less, and that's impressive in this day and age. So I support the staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. I'd like to commend council on the hard work, and also Victor and your staff and Tracy. This year verifies to me, in my opinion, we've been overtaxing the citizens of this beautiful city for far too long. We roll up our sleeves, go to work, because we discussed this at the SARC room, I think last week or the week before, and when we went through that meeting, there was no conversation. Victor, you verified it. We're not cutting any services to the city, and I totally, Your word is absolutely good with myself. We're not cutting services. We're lowering the taxes. And that's what the citizens of the city deserve, and I'm pleased that we're getting there, and I look forward to future work. In such a short time that yourself and Ms. Sam were able to do this, so I just lift my hands up and apply to yourself and council to go ahead, because we're not cutting services, contrary to what some may say. And we had a $5 million surplus last year. We've been overtaxing far too long, so it's good work. Thank you very much, sir.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. I didn't want to turn this into an argument. I wanted to turn it into an explanation as to why I was not supporting the budget. I feel that there are services that need to be added. I think that we need additional policing services. I think that we require a new fire hall in the North End. I think that several of our departments are not staffed to the optimum where I would like to see them. And so those are the values that I bring to this vote. I think that maybe you could tell me how much this budget is. Exact.
Thank you. The 2016 budget, operating budget is $128 million, and the capital is $60 million, including a $27 million of carry forward work from last year.
So a $5 million surplus would amount to what percentage?
That would be about 4-5%.
So in a budget that large, 5% surplus would not be, in my view, in excess. I think that the citizens are entitled to know that we have budgeted to a degree that we have some cushion. I don't see it as overtaxing. And it's not as though the $5 million that we have in surplus funds at the end of the year are simply not used. They are distributed into the next budget, either into reserves or for different projects, et cetera. So, it seems fair to me that if I'm going to cast my vote, that I should explain why. I'm not looking for reasons why I'm wrong or why I'm right. I just want to explain why I'm casting my vote in a certain way.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate the comments that my colleagues have made. I would just like to thank staff for the work they've put into this budget, and I will be pleased to support it. I agree with Councillor Kipp's comment that this, I think, has been a year of finding efficiencies, doing things better with our core review, and I think we have saved money, and I think this budget reflects that. And we have not cut services, which is very important, which I have been assured of and which I accept. But I also want to say that as we look ahead, and I think the 5-year plan in the budget recognizes this, I don't think the citizens of Nanaimo should expect a 0% budget every year. And as our city grows and increases, I personally want to see our services match that growth. And I want to see more facilities. And I think our citizens want that as well. So as we move forward, I think we need to plan for growth and be prepared to finance that growth. I am pleased that we are holding the line this year with the efficiencies that we have found. And again, I'll be happy to support this budget. But I also look to the future, and I hope that we initiate some projects which might involve a slight increase in taxes in future years. And again, I think the budget for the 5-year term ahead reflects that. Thanks.
Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. To Councillor Brennan, more so it's debate, and I think that's healthy that we talk about what our views are. And I appreciate the fact of your views and that we know them. From my perspective, of course, when we look at our 5%, the surplus that I think we found, we have our reserves built, and we have things built, and we're looking at a plan with that. I think we have found some extra surpluses, and that's my point. I guess one of my concerns with our budgeting The federal budgets, their budget equals their assets. At the provincial level, the budget equals about a seventh of the assets. We're sitting in a municipal government where if our budget's $200 million, our assets are $2 billion. We're down there at our budget's 1/10 of our assets. So I totally understand the fact that we have to have our priorities in saving. We have to look at ensuring that we can continue what we have. And I think the key thing that you said there, we haven't established our priorities. Over the last years for me, I would have put a fire hall in long before I would have put a spillway in. And the spillways cost us $4.5 million, and that was a priority we set at that point. A fire hall out in the north end is only $2.5 million. So if we get those priorities and we concentrate on that, I think we will do better over time. Thank you.
Councillor Hung.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I will support this budget because I think the staff have put a lot of work into it. They've used best practices. I know that we had a $5 million surplus. Well, in budget planning, ideally you want to have zero, and that's the best practice. And if the staff can achieve what they're going to say they're going to do, we hope that other organizations will do the same thing and not have surpluses or shortages because they're using the best practice. And I think that if we show that we can do this, others will follow, and I think the staff are doing an amazing job with it. I don't think anybody is expecting 0% forever. I think Victor mentioned that we had other income that was more, and if we can keep growing our housing and DCCs and all the other stuff that's going to contribute to increased income, that is going to offset what we have to pay for the property taxes. So, and I'm optimistic that the economy is going to turn around and we can provide services and more services like Councillor Thorpe had mentioned that the citizens all deserve. So, and I think we can still do that without drastically increasing taxes. I think there's other ways that we can do it. Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I was simply wishing to vote, and this is one of the first times in a decade that I feel as optimistic and comfortable with supporting the majority of this budget, which hasn't always been the case for me. Supporting the majority, it's hard to support something that's this large, that has so many moving parts and so many moving pieces. And of course, we all have our special interests that we'd like to see certain things have a little bit more expenditure or a little less in some cases. And that's why I think the strategic plan that we're undertaking that expired in 2015 December, that we hadn't really paid a whole lot of attention to in our last year because of many other things that we were focused on, one of those being the core services review, and then trying to do them both at the same time and wondering if we could or even should, put us in a bit of a awkward position for this one. And the compliments that are being extended to staff and council for the hard work that's been undertaken to get us to this place where we have that stronger sense of confidence and the moving forward with a new culture and change comes sometimes with a little bit of pain. But to Councillor Brennan's point, I'd just like to say that, you know, when and I don't disagree with her at all. At some point in time, I'm sure that there's going to be other projects that we're going to invest in, and it's not an expense; it's an investment. And at some point in time, we're going to have to invest in many facilities. To Councillor Thorpe's point too, and Councillor Yoakum, it's not going to stay at 0% if we want to continue to add to our inventory of offerings and opportunities within our city. And it's going to increase our budget over time, of course. Be that a fire hall. Councillor Kipp forgot to mention the $2 million in staff that's going to cost on an annual basis. So when we start to add things to our infrastructure, we have to know that there's other areas that are going to increase too. But I think this is an outstanding budget. I think we should be really proud of the accomplishments to get to this point with efficiencies and shifting a little bit of our thinking. And we haven't really denied ourselves a whole lot in this budget either. So I look forward to 2016 and 17 coming out of the core services review and establishing our strategic priorities. And once we have our strategic priorities, I hope that, what Councillor Brennan's or Councillor Thorpe's or projects come to the top. We do have a $61 million capital list right now. So in this budget, so I sure hope that we can do more. I want to do more, but I just want to make sure that over the course of 10 years, when we plan that out, that we're doing things proactively instead of reactively. And when we get our house in order, we'll be able to do that. And that's why I think this budget is so important. Thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
I'll be brief. As I said, I really appreciate what staff have done. This is a budget, and the way the budget was done over the last year has made it easier for the average person to understand the budgeting process. We've had a lot of open meetings where people have been invited to. We've been very open with this. And even on the agenda, it says right below the 0%, the 2.8%, the financial plan includes a 1% increased contribution to the General Asset Management Reserve in 2016 and 2017. So it's right there for everybody to see. Excellent job. I will support it.
Thank you. No further speakers. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, 2016 Property Tax Rates Bylaw. Councillor Hong.
That the Property Tax Rates Bylaw 2016, number 7230, to fix the tax rates upon real property of the City of Nanaimo and to provide the payment of taxes for the year of 2016 pass first reading.
Thank you. Seconder? Second. Seconded. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Brennan being opposed.
No.
In favor?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well,
That the Property Tax Rates Bylaw 2016, number 7230, pass second reading.
seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That the Property Tax Rate Bylaw 2016, number 7230, pass third reading.
Seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Thank you. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we got one little bit of housekeeping on that one. We have to go to the recommendation on page 9 that Council received for information, the report. Councillor Kipp and seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Seeing no discussion, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item. Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax Bylaw number 7228.
We're moving to jump forward.
Yeah, that's in the jump forward position. Yeah. Oh, you're talking to these guys. All righty then. Thank you. So it's been moved to 7B or 7C, I guess it is. All right. The purpose is to provide council additional information on the legal requirements related to this bylaw. We have two delegations. The first one being Mr. Tim McGrath.
Council, I'd like to have Denise Bryce come forward first. She's done the majority of the work on this, so I'd like to let her continue on first.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Everybody. My name is Denise Bryce, and I reside on Hunter Street, the townside area of the city. I'm here to voice my concerns regarding the parcel tax bylaw number 7228 once again. As you are aware, this bylaw, once adopted, will clear the way to increase the parcel tax each and every year from 2016 to 2022 and beyond. My purpose this afternoon is to expose the unfairness of this method of taxation and to request that you make an attempt to slow the ever-escalating costs of the plan. Since my last presentation, I have delved deeper into the topic. I've had conversations with the Ministry of Community, local government department in Victoria, and searched backward in time to review the steps which brought us to where we are today. Nanaimo not only contributes to capital costs and improvements, or capital costs, purchases, and improvements, including walkways, bridges, guardrails, signs, washrooms, etc. We also contribute to administrative and operating costs, which may include consultant and contracting fees, liability insurances, maintenance programs, security, and again, staffing via a separate property value tax on our tax notices. This all leads to an ever-expanding bureaucracy in the regional district. I have compiled a review of some of the steps which brought us to this arrangement as it exists today. Once Nanaimo, Parksville, and Qualicum and Lanceville signed on to this Parks and Trails Services Agreement, a decision was made at the regional level to replace the proportional method of cost recovery to the parcel tax method, whereby residential parcel owners would be required to pay the same rate per parcel with no regard to the parcel value. The following motions were passed by the regional district just prior to the time when the municipalities came on board. Number 1, that the apportionment formula for the regional parks bylaw be deleted and that funding for acquisition/capital development be obtained through parcel taxes. Number 2, that the parcel tax rate be set at $10 commencing in 2006. And number 3, that a property value tax be levied and collected for operations and maintenance. This is an additional tax. Parcel taxes appear as add-ons on your property tax notices, as does the value-added tax noted in number 3. This has the effect of removing the property tax relief that our council has successfully provided to us by introducing a proposed zero tax increase this year. Congratulations. These add-ons really do downplay your successful accomplishment. The fact is that our overall taxes will actually increase, some say as much as 7% or more this year, thanks to the RDN. I expect that your hard work will be overshadowed by disappointment, disbelief, questions, and worst of all, distrust, which will no doubt be expressed by taxpayers themselves. Perhaps it's time for the RDN to take the lead of the City of Nanaimo and conduct their very own core services review. This combined parcel tax burden disproportionately falls on single-family residential parcels. In its own words, the RDN admits that moving to a flat rate per parcel reduces property taxes for high-value properties and may slightly increase property taxes for lower-value properties. I repeat, moving to a flat rate per parcel reduces property value taxes for high-value properties and may slightly increase property taxes for lower-value properties. Remember, this ever-increasing tax will ever increase the resulting inequity. Parcel taxes are easy to sell. Local officials are often advised not to publicize the introduction of these taxes, which brings me to the following action taken by the Nanaimo Council in October of 2005. That Council waive the consent requirements under Section 801.4 of the Local Government Act by consenting to the adoption of Regional Parks and Trails Service Area Conversion Amendment Bylaw, and further, that the RDN be notified accordingly. Apparently, all the good things that the tax would provide were expanded upon at the time, all the good things that, of course, money can buy. Also, the convincing argument was, it is only a few cents a day or a few dollars a month. The amount was made to sound trivial and would provide a great value. That is why parcel taxes are such an easy sell. They appear to be so very reasonable at the onset. The inequities of the scheme were simply not discussed at the time. These inequities are, 1, that the parcel tax was completely unfair and would have a greater effect on low-income and fixed-income folks. Number 2, that the amount would increase and escalate rapidly and without much accountability. And number 3, that the increases would be permanent or everlasting, or in Nanaimo's case, the term used was in perpetuity. Number 4, that the process to waive the consent requirements under the Local Government Act effectively eliminated the option of public participation, either via a notification procedure or an opportunity to participate in an alternate approval process. My guess is that time was of the essence and there was a mad rush to get it on stream and start collecting the tax as quickly as possible. To me, this was disrespectful to the taxpayers and virtually eliminated the transparency that we deserve. This motion led the way to implementing this scheme virtually under the radar. Many of my friends and family to this day have no idea what this parcel tax is all about, nor did I until recently. I would suggest that if we all share the benefit of using regional parks and trails, either by physically visiting them or by benefiting from their ability to stimulate economic activity, then a formula should be struck to share the tax proportionately and more fairly as it once was. I have been advised that because we are now 4 months into the year 2016, we are required by regulation to pay the parcel tax for this year. However, I would request that before consenting to the proposed increases from 2017 through 2022 and beyond, that Council request a full review of this arrangement and request that the RDN investigate returning to the former cost recovery method of proportional taxation or perhaps a tax based on property values, and inform the taxpaying citizens of Nanaimo, perhaps in their tax notices, of the true implications of the parcel tax system, who is required to pay these taxes, and what exactly are they paying for. I realize the parcel tax section of the Community Charter dictates the manner in which this tax is to be passed on, but there were and are other choices available. I believe that these other choices still exist and may present a fairer way to impose this tax burden on all the citizens of Nanaimo. I continue to believe that this grand plan, however noble and promising as it is simply too grand for us to pay for at this particular time and at the levels at which it is escalating. There are many other noble but extremely necessary local issues that need to be dealt with and paid for out of our tax dollars right here in our own backyard. We already share in paying for our very own municipally owned parks. Many of us are trying to survive on low incomes and fixed incomes. I would like to see a more scaled-back version of this Parks and Trails plan and an honest answer to how the increases are calculated. I understand that the following motion was carried at the April 12th Committee of the Whole meeting held at the Regional District. That staff prepare a report with regard to conducting a regional services review after the appointment of Chief Administrative Officer and prior to the next financial plan adoption. Excuse me. I look forward to the outcome when the issue is brought forward. However, or hopefully, there is some way that interested parties can be informed when that discussion is scheduled to take place. Public participation and public discussion is always good. It makes us feel like we played a part in the decision-making and that perhaps our concerns made a difference. It allows arguments for and against an issue to take place before decisions are made, not after. It builds trust and good relationships with our council, our appointed RDN board members and city officials, which at present, I believe, is starting to swing in a more positive direction. Now, I asked city staff to give me a couple of easy answers for me rather than a lot of pages to read through, and they very kindly did. And over the past 5 years, through the Regional Parks Requisition, which covers administrative costs for this program, Nanaimo has paid almost $3 million for the Parks and Trails parcel tax that contributes to the capital costs. It's paid $2,084,000, and that's only the past 5 years. It doesn't go back all the way to 2006. And keep in mind that Parksville, Qualicum, Lanceville, and I think there's 8 electoral areas are also paying this. So that's a lot of cash. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for all the work you've done on this project. I wanted to ask you, are you coming out to the RDN?
I beg your pardon?
Are you presenting your same presentation to the RDN?
Well, hopefully I'll have some more information by then, but yes, I plan to, but I don't know when the meetings are coming up, and I don't have the time to keep following who's having what and when. That's the hard part.
There's a board meeting tomorrow night, actually.
If there was something on the city's website maybe that would tell me there was a board meeting at the RDN, then I would be reminded. But
I think you probably have to go to the RDNs for that.
I know.
But I know what you're talking about with respect to all of the different taxes. I was reviewing a file the other day that was a $13,500 tax bill for a community in the southern part of the island, to be unnamed. Everything else that was added to it presented a total bill of $47,500 for a single property. Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you.
You are now.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Bryce. Thank you very much for coming and for your presentation, for the research that you've done. Certainly by bringing it to our attention, you've caused me to learn something, which is always a good thing. And I think you've got some good suggestions. One question, I just want to be sure, are you opposed to supporting regional parks and trails, period? Or is it just the manner in which taxpayers are doing it at the time through this parcel tax, which, as you've pointed out, is increasing?
To tell you the truth, I didn't know very much about it until I started looking into it very recently. And my first reaction was, I'm dead against it. But once you start looking at it, you realize that there's good here.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't like the way it was sneaked in, once you research it back, that the public really didn't know what was going on. It's a huge plan. And I also didn't like how the increases just seem to happen. They seem to put the money we need before what we plan to spend it for. It's like a kid asking for an increase in his allowance. I might need it. It's like that sort of thing. We might need it, so let's ask for it. It's sort of hooded in secrecy. And, you know, the meetings happen out of the Regional District Board, and the relationship between the Regional District Board and the city and all these areas, the agreement, it's a little bit too much for people to take in. It's hard to understand. And the numbers are, when I add them all up and look at them, I can't believe the numbers. You know, for $1, $2, $3, little parcels of land, it doesn't seem like very much. Then the other thing is, does BC Hydro pay $1 for parcel? Does Woodgrove Mall pay $1 for parcel?
So it's the manner of the tax which is your main concern.
I am in favor of it.
Right.
I'm in favor of more transparency. I'm in favor of spending less on it. I think it's too grand a plan. I think we have lots of ideas and lots of things that we need, and we're putting it all in one place right now. This is a big...
Thank you. I'll just, if I may, further comment that I think a lot of people have confusion about City of Nanaimo jurisdiction as opposed to Regional District of Nanaimo, and partly it's because of the similarity in the names. This is a Regional District tax, which we support or have supported. And I think it would be a great idea if you did find time to present at the regional district. That's where this issue stems from. But again, thank you for your research, and I appreciate your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Denise, for your correspondence and your two presentations and the research and effort that you've put in. What I'm hearing you say, and I certainly feel as though, and I'm inclined to agree with you, the proportionate parcel tax, particularly when you mention, you know, Woodgrove or BC Hydro or whomever, is at a buck for all parcels, whether it's a residential or a commercial or industrial large piece of dirt. So I'm hearing that loud and clear. I think that we do intend to do a full review at the regional district table. Unfortunately, as you read that motion, it was not until such time as a permanent CAO is hired and before the next financial plan, which will be for 2017. So that puts us in a awkward position because this is a 7-year commitment up until 2022 or 6 years or whatever it is. So a 6-year commitment, should we proceed with this? And I just wanted to point out one thing. Through your research and through your correspondence, a report that came back from RDN staff, and one of the things was it was mentioned in their report that none of the monies that are collected, of which 53% comes from the city of Nanaimo, none of it goes toward administration. That's what the report that came back to us from the RDN indicated. I don't have any graphs or where monies were or weren't allocated or spent or not, but that, and I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus here, but that what came back is that the monies that we collect on behalf of the regional district for this property tax, Parks and Trails property tax, none of it is spent on admin or wages. Yeah, sure. And so I'm just, And it's all public knowledge because it's been sent to us and it's not private or confidential. So I'm just making that comment.
I have my tax notices here. And on the levies collected on behalf of other agencies, there's two areas that collect for parks. One's called Regional District Parks, and the other one's called Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax. The Regional Parks and Trails Parcel Tax, there's no administration that comes out of that. That's just capital costs and I think improvements. But the Regional District Parks, you actually receive an invoice from them to pay for administrative costs and I believe maintenance costs for those parks. They're two separate. So the answer you got was correct. The parcel tax does not pay for administration costs. But there's another area on here that we actually do pay for administration costs called Regional District Parks. I think. That's what I was told. And I have a notice here that I got today that tells me the Regional Parks requisition amount and the Parks and Trails parcel tax amount.
I believe you. Certainly, I'm not. Trust me, I'm not arguing with you. It would be like, no, it's not happening. But I'm just relating the information, and you have more information clearly than I'm familiar with in this moment. So I thank you for bringing that to our attention. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick things to fact check. You're concerned with the flat rate, not so opposed to one that is more based on more equitable than that. And the effect on people with fixed income is one of your concerns, or those in a lower income, and the accountability for that. And one of your main concerns was how this was governed and brought into order. That's the thing. No, I understand that. Now, I'm going to say from the regional perspective, money goes into Mount Benson Park, Moorcroft, Nanaimo River Regional Park, which is on this side, the Fry Road side of Nanaimo River. Mount Benson Park, as I said, and a number of parks throughout the regional district, up into Deep Bay and some different areas. I know. So from my perspective, Mount Arrowsmith Park, some of those have all benefited from this regional taxation. I guess one of the concerns I have in the regional taxation is how many levels of government we have within our region. It's only 140,000 people, and there's Lanceville, Nanaimo, Parksville, Qualicum, and then all the regional district, all CAOs, all financial officers, and that. So it's quite expensive, and I understand your concerns with it. So I appreciate the fact that you don't like the flat rate and the inequity and how it came about. And thank you very much for the work you do.
I pay twice, actually, too, because we have two properties.
Up in Horn Lake.
We thank you for your continued support. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. Ms. Bryce, I just want to say that I agree with you that the parcel tax is an unfair tax. And I think that's something that, countries all over the world argue against flat taxes like that. And this is certainly one. And I think that's how we bought Mount Benson, was through that tax. And so sometimes when you weigh the benefits of what you obtain with the unfairness, at the time it seemed a reasonable thing to do, but I agree with you. A flat tax is an unfair tax. I do, however, really support the regional parks and trails. I think that until we start seeing this mid-island area as a region and start making decisions regionally, we're going to fall behind the 8 ball over and over again, and I think we have to start thinking regionally. So I think that we need to put a little more effort into making sure that our citizens are aware of the decisions that get made at the regional district, and have discussions with citizens about the value of planning and doing work regionally. I think that's one of the issues here that we haven't been very successful at, in making sure that the citizens in Nanaimo understand why we, like to do things regionally and why, in particular, regional parks and trails is a good idea. So, for what it's worth, yeah, you're right on the flat tax, and just letting you know how much I appreciate the regional parks and trails and how much I appreciate a regional method of doing planning.
Thank you. Councillor Hone.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I did get the email with the stats that you were mentioning, and I think it was on $11 at 2011, and 2012 was $12, and it's been 13, 13, 13 until 2016, which is then going to go up to 14. And you're correct that there are two taxes. The parcel tax, I think it seems it's unfair, but it's also fair that it's reserved. So it's more reserve money, so we can switch it over where it's more regional parks requisition like you have on your percentage, and then say allocate 2% or whatever percent into a reserve, kind of like what we do here. So that is one option that you would prefer, is what I'm trying to get at as a question. So if you want us to eliminate the Parks and Trails parcel tax, in that sense, where you're talking about being equitable and fair, we can charge more money for the parks, regional parks requisition, and on a reserve, save, it looks like this number is about 40% that we would actually put into a reserve. Is that what you're kind of preferring?
No. I think that the two areas where the money goes, one is just for admin, the other one is for capital costs. That's why it's separate. But as far as being a reserve fund that you just top up, I don't like that idea. I think you should have a budget for what you want to attain and have a cap on that, because what's to stop the regional district from coming to Nanaimo and giving them an invoice for 10 times more or 20 times more? There has to be some kind of a...
Yeah, I understand, but the reason we have the parcel tax, if I'm not mistaken, is so we can have money when a big chunk of property comes up, saying another piece of Mount Benson comes up for sale, or if we save enough to buy our watershed, that money has to come from somewhere. If we wanted to buy a piece of Mount Benson right now and saying, well, we need $10 million, and we didn't have any of this in reserve, we're going to tax the people so that one year it's going to be a huge tax increase. Isn't this why we have reserves? So we can offset the cost if we need to get something, or if an opportunity comes forward, and that's what this parcel tax is for, is it's capital to buy stuff. Kind of what we have in our capital budget. We put reserves aside. So if we wanted to buy property, we say, well, we have $6 million. We're going to add $500,000 every year. So when something comes up, like the Wilcox property, that wasn't direct tax. That was from reserves, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. But that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. So would you prefer, because I would like to put money aside to buy property, to buy parks. It's very important, especially in our region. So my question to you again was, would you prefer us to eliminate the parcel tax, roll it in to parks requisition, and put a chunk of that money aside in reserves?
I would appreciate it if it was a tax that was more in proportion to what people can pay based on where they live.
Yeah, that's, I think, yes.
I'm not against you putting money in the bank, but what's to cap how much money you want to spend? If it's so easy just to say, oh, we might need it for a $10 million park, so we need to up it by $5 this year. There's no fail-safe on there. The parcel tax, I thought, was to pay for a service that had a cost, and once it was paid, then you paid to maintain that service. And there doesn't seem to be an end to this purchase plan.
Okay.
It's like we're going to be just purchasing parks and parks and parks forever. I did research which parks were bought, and I found that it was hard to follow how much was paid for them, because lots of them said we partnered with Land Trust, or we did this or we did that, but I never got any figures to say what we actually paid for them.
Okay, great.
It's hard for a person who's paying the tax to understand what they're paying for.
Yeah,
hard to
I
plan for
understand
the
that.
future.
Yeah.
You haven't got a ceiling.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Hard to explain. Hard to
Councillor
explain.
Fuller.
I'm an amateur. I'm just giving it a shot here.
I wonder if I could, before Councillor Fuller comes on, Ms. Bryce, can you just pull that microphone a little closer to your
Sorry.
tech fellows are saying that we're having some
Sorry.
audio problems. Great, thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Thanks for bringing this up, Denise. Paying attention, being at council meetings for almost 15 years on your side of the bench, I don't believe I've ever heard a discussion of parcel taxes that's been expanded to this amount of time. I've certainly learned a lot. I don't like the unfairness of it. Totally don't like that. And I know there's people that don't like other things like this parcel tax. You own a piece of property, you pay $1. And business licenses are another one I get complaints on. Small business paying the same for a business license, a mom and pop, as Woodgrove Mall. So totally get that. And I think in the report here, there could be a way that we could revisit it. It looks like they are going to revisit it through the RDN in 2017. So 2016 is basically a write-off. But I don't see us, if I read our report right, and you've read the report that we got
I think so.
on
yeah.
our agenda?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So in reading this, it looks like we can approve 2016, but not approve the rest of the years. We do not have to approve the 7-year plan. That's how I'm reading this report. So we'll see how this goes. And I really appreciate you bringing all this up. Definitely educational, if nothing else. Definitely.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, mine, not any questions to the delegation.
Okay. Thank you very much. No further questions for you, ma'am. Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Just to debate Councillor Hong, there's two theories on that. Do we put aside a lot of money now and we'll have it there, and then if something comes up in the future, we'll have the money to buy it? Or when that property comes up to purchase, we actually borrow at that point and have rapid borrowing available? Because if I save now for 15 years and then we go to buy a park, I'm going to be dead and I won't get to use that park. But if at that time I'm alive and I'm going to get to use that park, and so we borrow then. So the thing with borrowing reserves and keeping money ahead sometimes, the only concern I have is that it does get directed to that specific item, or parks in general. It doesn't get moved anywhere else. So the theory of whether we borrow to get something immediately and pay for it over its lifetime that we use, its life cycle, or we save money now to borrow. So it's a different, sometimes, philosophy for me. I like what we get for the parks, but I'm really concerned now how we establish this. Was the process clean and pure? So thank you. Just a debate point.
Thank you. See no further questions. Next speaker. You can certainly. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Sir.
Good evening, Council. My name's Tim McGrath, 431 3rd. I'm a little concerned about this parcel tax. One of the things that, as Denise brought it forward, that I was surprised at is that you voted at it at the RDN before discussing it here. I hope that with future issues that Mr. Neiman will make sure that it's settled here prior to voting at the RDN, so that we're not stuck in that catch-22 that we can't do anything about it now because we've already voted for it. So that's one item. The other item is the matter of the city of Nanaimo paying 53% versus everyone else. I can certainly agree with that, Mount Benson. It's obviously beneficial to Nanaimo than anyone else, but do the citizens of Nanaimo understand And have you told them, as council, have you explained this to them, that they're going to be paying 53% for the new trail to Coombs? And how many people in Nanaimo will be able to use that park, realistically? We don't have rapid transit out there. So anybody who doesn't have a car, unless they got really good-looking legs and they can bicycle that far, aren't going to be able to use it. And should they be paying for it? The other thing to consider is with the parcel tax. We understand that commercial and industrial properties pay the Parks and Trail parcel tax, as do condos and multiplexes. The way I read that, it's telling me that there's one parcel for, say, Cameron Island. It may be made up of two, maybe even three, but there's 1,000 people living there. They're paying the same tax per parcel as the person in Harewood, or the person in the South End down on Needham or on Halliburton. Well, when you look at the value of their properties versus the value of a home down on Halliburton or on Harewood Road or on Bruce Street, I just can't see that tax, it's not being done fairly. It's not proportional to the value. It's not even proportional to the number of people who are using the park. There's certainly a lot more people up on Cameron Island than there is in a 900 square foot home in Harewood. But the tax is the same. When it comes to savings and reserves, one of the difficulties with collecting the money and holding it in reserve is if you have the money, it's much easier to spend, especially as a corporation. As a government, it's much easier to spend the money we'll just take it out of the budget. Rather than going to the people and saying, you know what, this park that we're going to build up at Aerosmith or wherever is really, really something, and we think you should help us buy it. But it comes with a different mindset. The problem is that the people 5 years from now may very well look at it and say, you know what, we've got all these gorgeous parks. We don't really need any more. We might need it for transit. We might need, and I'm a firm believer that we should take it and spend it at that point. If I gave my ex-wife $20 million that she already had and she could spend any way she wanted, it would be spent. On the other hand, if you come and ask me now, do you want to spend $20 million on the ex-wife? I'm going to say, no way, not on her. So it's not much different when it comes to the parks. It's not much different when it comes to any capital expense. Doing it from that manner, it's just dangerous. And it's not really servicing the people. The people don't know what you're doing. Do the people in Nanaimo really know what they're paying for? And as people said, we have too many levels of government. You got to have a notice there. You got to go to this website. You got to go to that website. We got to make it easier for people to understand. Plain and simple. We're talking today about subdivisions and the increase in the number of parcels that we're getting. Well, our parcels are going up, but are the parcels everywhere else going up? Our numbers are going up, so we're going to be obviously paying more tax. But you're not going to get that in Bowser, and you're not going to get it in Deep Bay. So I think it's really, really important that you analyze it very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp has a question for you.
No, more of a statement. If your ex had 20 million, she wouldn't be your ex.
You're right there.
Thank you very much. Move receipt of the delegation. Moved by Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Hong. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Well, based on the staff report, which I appreciate, and I think it's an excellent report, and it gives us an option, and it doesn't remove the fact that we're supporting this parcel taxation for 2016, which we've essentially committed ourselves to, and we're 5 months into it. So as you can all see on page 2 of the green sheets, I think it's page 2, there's the preamble, and then there's the offerings of following steps we could take if we so choose.
I need to interrupt you. Mr. Jackson, page 2 of the addendum for this meeting, is that included in what the public receives, or are they just receiving the title pages?
No, Your Worship, we have the complete addendum with these these reports attached.
Great, thank you.
They're
So
on the
they
green
can follow
sheets.
along on page 2. Great, thank you. I'm sorry, Councillor Bestwick.
No worries. So thanks. So I would wish to follow the guidance that's been provided to us, because I think it makes, and I can make the motions if you like, there's 5 of them, or I can, and then speak to why I think it's a good idea, or we can just move through them a little quicker, whatever your.
I would say just move all 5 recommendations.
Thank you. I would, thanks, Councillor Yocum.
There's no objection to that, Mr. Jackson?
Your Worship, I was just reviewing the reports the first time I had a chance to take a look, and there is a part of the legislation that says you can't give third reading and adoption of a bylaw in the same meeting. So one change to this would be you could give third reading, and then we would bring it back next Monday, and you could consider adoption at that time. So it's a 1-week delay, but it is important in terms of the community charter.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we'll hit pause and come back next Monday.
So all 4. And we'll still meet any deadlines we've got out there at the RDM. That's May, what did we say, May 15th?
May 2nd.
Mr. Bama.
This is a somewhat convoluted process, and I hope not to confuse you. So in my email that I sent trying to explain the position that we're coming at this, we didn't have the benefit of Mr. Jackson's knowledge in terms of timing, because the RDN is only adopting the related bylaw tomorrow at the RDN. So if we do the 3 readings here today and say we'll come back and adopt, it becomes an irrelevant process legislatively. So probably what you could do then depends on what you do at the RDN tomorrow. So if you have enough votes to make changes at the RDN and slow the process, probably that's one way of dealing with it. Otherwise, it won't matter.
So in essence, what we're doing here is simply giving assent to the 2016 contribution to a bylaw that they will be adopting tomorrow that will go in many years out in the future. Right. But we can go as far as Mr. Jackson has suggested, 3rd reading tonight, and that's it, right? Okay, great. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you.
Move the 4 then.
Yeah, I will move the 4 of them, and then I'd like to comment on the comments from Mr. Mima, please. So I'll move number 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Great. Seconder. Councillor Kipp, thank you. Any discussion?
Yes, please. So, and this is as it relates, and I understand the redundancy that you referenced, but so if we approve this and ultimately proceed to adopt the bylaw a week from now, then we've approved 2016 at $14 only. And I'm not so sure how comfortable I feel about talking about what we might do tomorrow night here right now, and I don't know if that puts us at any compromise. So I'm asking the question: do we put ourselves in any compromise if I continue to discuss what I'd like to recommend we do tomorrow night?
Well, I guess it's always a tricky one. You should not fetter your discretion. So when you go to next Monday's council meeting, regardless of what you said up to that point, you were coming into it with, quote, an open mind. And then you, with an open mind, adopt the bylaw or choose not to.
Thank you. And my reference is not to next Monday. My reference is to, because I would be doing it tonight if I could, but I can't because of the new information. I'm speaking more to what happens tomorrow night at the RDN. I'm not, so...
I would be very cautious with speaking tonight about what you might do tomorrow.
That's my question.
What I could suggest is some wording is that you're really indicating that you're supporting where it is now. And that's the point, is where it is now. And it's going to take a heck of a lot of convincing for you to choose something else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Mr. Miller?
So if we went with 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then tomorrow at the RDN, the bylaw is adopted. So the way it reads at the RDN, it's for all years, right? And so the RDN doesn't need to do anything next year other than send me a requisition, which I'm obligated to pay. So that's the complication of the whole thing. And so another way of looking at it is approving it, and then at the RDN, between now and the next budget, get into the conversation that addresses the points that the delegations have been raising. Those are options probably that you could look at.
Correct. So tomorrow, they're going to be looking at a parcel tax to raise X number of dollars. How we choose to raise that is our decision. Right. Great. Thank you. Councillor Owen.
Thank you. So just to be clear, we'll approve it 7 years, but we, as being directors or board members, can change that bylaw anytime we want, right? And then that would, if we change it and saying that we're not going to increase it and we're going to leave it or whatever we do.
Tonight you're going to be approving, you're going to be going to third reading to approve 1 year only, 2016.
Well, I think Victor is saying let's approve all 7 and change it at the RDN, right? No. Or no? It's easier for him, I think, is what he said.
Voting on 1, 2, 3, and 4, you're approving 1 year.
So the motion you have right now is just approving 2016. That's going to be the impact of that. What I am saying is that coming back and adopting this a week from today is irrelevant from an RDN perspective, because maybe let me back off because now I'm thinking it straight. So if you do 1 year, you're only consenting to 1 year tonight. Now, when it places a different perspective for what's in front of the RDN tomorrow, because we'll simply say our council only assented to 1 year. And then I guess you'll have another conversation of how that moves on forward. I think that's clearer. If we do this piece, that probably gives you the right path to where you want to be.
You've got 2 issues there at the RDN tomorrow. One is whether or not you want to carry on with that program and how it is you want to fund it. If you don't like the parcel tax, you can always talk about coming up with other funding formulas for the same end.
Yes.
Yep.
Exactly.
Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that tomorrow at the RDN, there could be a request made that staff bring back a report on other methods of taxation that would raise the same dollars. And then you have the balance of the year to deal with that, because you're actually just impacting next year's budget on that question.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I was going to make virtually the same point. I see us voting on 1, 2, 3, and 4 tonight. And then really, no matter what happens tomorrow at the RDN, we can still make a request that this be examined and a report brought back to modify their take on this parcel tax. So I don't see a problem with us going with 1, 2, 3, and 4 tonight.
Okay, great. Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
I hope I'm reading all of this right. It's pretty confusing. And if essentially we're voting for 2016, so that's 1 year out of the 7 that the RDN would like us to approve. Doesn't mean we're not going to approve something for 2017 next year as the city of Nanaimo. So, or the year after. We may, through this review that the RDN is looking at doing, my understanding, it would make sense for the RDN to also only vote for the 1 year and do the review up to next year. Who knows? They may come up with the idea that we only charge a 25-cent parcel tax. I don't know where they come up with $1. I think it's just easier to say $1, but so I'll support the first 4.
Great, thank you. So, that being said, on items 1, 2, 3, and 4, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now, to make it a little bit neater, shall we just defer item number 5?
No, Your Worship, don't need to do anything. We'll just add it to the agenda next week.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Next item, the Parks and Trails parcel. Okay, so that's 7228 again, be adopted. Direct quarterly awards, purchases. Quarterly direct award purchases. God, that's hard to say. The purpose is to comply with Council's purchasing policy delegation, and it's simply to receive a report.
Move to receive a report.
Councillor Kipp, seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Kipp.
On emergency management, the chlorine going in and out of the community, what's the tonnage on that? Like, we're ready for the chlor-rep, and who is our chlor-rep now for response on chlorine?
So we do our own response. So we've got our staff are fully trained for that. So we do our own response, and what we're moving in and out would be tonners. So that's what we have at the treatment plant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just not sounding a broken record, but sooner or later, I hope we have a policy in our bylaw with a certain percent, because I don't know if it's legal or not, if I'm allowed to say this, but it'd always be nice if we keep these contracts local. I know you guys do your best job, or I don't know if you can even comment on that, but so I just look forward to, like, I see a lot of these out-of-town addresses, and hopefully we can get to have a support local businesses, unless that's just their main addresses and they got local offices in town. But nevertheless, just always want to make sure we can put our own first. Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Just on number 4, page 17, supply and delivery of liquid chlorine. How is it delivered?
Comes in on a truck.
On regular ferry route?
I'm not really that sure how it comes in. I just know how it's delivered to the treatment plant is on a truck that backs into our bay, and then they unload it with a crane.
And would this be a similar product that would go to Crystal Gardens in Victoria, or the Wave Center in Duncan, or the pool in Port Alberni, or Glacier Gardens in Courtenay? Is this the same stuff?
Well, if what they're using is liquid chlorine, I would imagine this is the standard way that liquid chlorine is delivered. So it's a gas. It comes in a
cylinder,
tonner container.
The reason that I ask, if I may, is we are entertaining in the Parks and Recreation Services a class system compilation of like-minded communities to reduce costs, if potential. So we can, it's a bulk, or it's a purchase, if you will, of a program system. Do we take into consideration those types of opportunities on items like this? It's 150 grand. I'm sure that all of the pools in Victoria are doing the same, and Duncan and Courtenay and Port Alberni and everywhere else. I'm just wondering if there's a master contract, so to speak, and we could all share.
I'm not really sure of that. My understanding is a lot of the pools have converted over to a different chlorine system, so they're not using gaseous chlorine. Like, we don't use gaseous chlorine in our pool systems. So I believe a lot of people are converting away from gaseous chlorine. So I'm not sure, but there may be other municipalities on the island that do use gaseous chlorine for water treatment or possibly for pools.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Victor, did you have something? No? Oh, you're on here. All right, so motion has been seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, on to quarterly single submission purchases. Thank you, Councillor Kipp. We'll move our seconder. Seconder, Councillor Beswick. Discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Okay, approved. Thank you. And moving on to F, the results of investigation for public boat launch off Shenton Road and the relocation of Diver Road. We have one delegation. I think Mr. Fred Taylor. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. And name and address for the record, please.
Mayor Hong and council members. Regarding a public boat launch off Shenton Road. Council has in hand a copy of a consultant report addressed to the Parks, Recreation and Environment, dated February the 25th, 2012, which talks about happenings of later date, raising the question of the creation and the use of the consultant's report to achieve the goal of someone. There's a lot of misinformation been put in there that I don't think is a consultant's report. I remain of the opinion this report should not be before the council pending review by the appointed authority, Parks and Rec, as the report is addressed to that appointed authority. Yes, you may have received the consultant's report. You want to check your website too. They have no business license addressed in this town. So why are we using it? Benefit somebody? I spoke the last time, and I encourage Fish and Game to come and speak as well. The report says there was only one person. The Fish and Game got a lot of members they represented. Isn't it funny? You invite them out to show them, to promote them, what you want at Diver Lake. I've been all my life in this town and interested in aquatic things. You don't invite me because you know I'd like to say no. So let's conquer and divide, right? How it is. It sure appears that way. Why wouldn't you invite me too? When you're taking staff time to show Fish and Game to get their support. Is it wise to add a boat launch off Black Frank Drive, add vehicle congestion, etc., to other recreational uses, especially a large residential area, including a children's park, which such use will increase in time? So you've got a report before you. Have a city business license. They're helping us say, let's put the boat ramps down there. I've sent all council members a copy of the Real Estate Act that's new, that when you do away with a road, somewhere right close to it, because of subdivision rules and everything else, you've got to locate that road again. This lakeside park offers walking trails, wildlife viewing, a playground, fitness circuit, and BMX tracks. there is an accessible fishing float there as well. Today, there's no demand for boat launch off Shenton Road, but as our population grows, so does the demand for recreational activities. The report states the proposed land diver road exchange was opposed by a member of the public. What about the Fish and Game? And representing all our membership. They had a big meeting about it to decide to oppose closing the road. A very intelligent gain of the developer to trade land the developer owns and must protect for our public access to Diver Lake. And as the report states, the existing wetland vegetation. Nobody can do it, even the developer, the city of Nanaimo. We've got bylaws. You're willing to take that land that you can't do anything with, or the developer can't do anything with, and give them land he can do something with, and lose our access to the lake? You've got half a dozen accesses into Long Lake. You've always said, and I can show you all kinds of records, no. You go past the rest stop, which is owned by the Highways Department, it's busy. A lot of people, the public, like to use Long Lake. Don't you think they do the same over there? The parking lot's a lot of times full. Fred Taylor opened that up. And I don't just support what you've got in your experts' advice. The Ministry of Transportation reviewing the Land Title Act. Are they experts in law? It's a Land Title Act, not their act. It's up to us to interpret the Real Estate Act and Land Title Act ourselves and go to our lawyers to say what it says if you're not sure. But to put something in a report to add to the report that the Ministry of Transportation reviewed it and for comment. Who are they? The simple way to protect the public access is to demand Diver Road be relocated to the south side of 3789 Shenton Road in order to permit a continuous parcel of land for the landowner. I don't object to doing that. Protecting the marshland on his land as a condition of his development of his private land. Not handed to us. We can't do anything with it. It's supposed to be protected. And then you talk about your report, putting a fishing pier down the end of the trail access road there, next to Steve Marshall there. There's Fish Barren Creek there. Stay away from it. It doesn't help fish habitat by starting to put stuff around it, especially the creek that goes to from there to Long Lake. Somebody's trying to get what they want, and I don't like it.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I see no questions. Motion to receive delegation, please. So move Councillor Thorpe, seconder Councillor Bestwick, or Councillor Yoakum, sorry. All those in favor? Opposed? No. Thank you. And Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I just ask that we could pull up page, I believe it's 23 in the agenda. It's just a map of the property. It's just a little easier for me to speak to. Great, thank you. So, as mentioned by the delegation, this was before council a number of months ago, and it's part of a rezoning application of which the bylaw has received first and second reading, and it's now scheduled to go forward to the public hearing. When we were in front of council to talk about the road exchange portion, there was a request for us to go off and look at this issue of access to the lake, specifically for boat access to Diver Lake. So the study was commissioned to have a habitat assessment done that looked at specifically the Diver Road area and that future opportunities to build an access at that location. What came out of the report was a recognition that any additional boat launch on the north side of the lake, on the top side of the lake, would result in an impact on the existing habitat. So the report recommended that we look at improving the existing access for boat launch at the end of Black Franks, which is off Labio Road. So there are some minor improvements that we're going to proceed with this summer, including putting down some gravel, and there's some no-post barriers that will have to be relocated or modified to allow better access to the lake on the south side. In addition, there was originally a fishing pier in behind Steve Marshall Ford that was built as part of their development. It was part of the condition of their development approvals. This would be going back to the very early 90s. That had decayed to the point where it was actually removed by the Parks Department a year or two ago. So the study recommends that be replaced back in on the lake. I'm sorry, I don't have a pointer, but it's on the top side, just behind Steve Marshall Ford there. So that approximately in that just down a little bit along the water. There's still the trail terminates at the lake there, so it's just a matter of putting the bridge back in and having a floating raft in there. So we're currently getting some costing for that, and it would show up in your 2017 budget for deliberations. The third part would be to ultimately, the intent is to build a trail that goes all the way around the lake. So the third part would be to look at when it comes time to build that trail through this section of property is how we could improve opportunities for lake access. Finally, as a condition of the rezoning, it was negotiated that the developer would improve the works and services fronting not only the development site, but all of the parkland. So when I say works and services, I'm talking about curb, gutter, sidewalk, repaving of the road and that portion. During that design, we're going to put a curb drop down, which could allow for future access through the area that we're taking at Park. Should council deem in the future it's important to put an additional boat launch facility on the north side, we would have that infrastructure in place. You would still have to set aside money in a budget to actually build that piece of infrastructure, and you would still need to obtain the necessary approvals from the Ministry of Environment to go through the habitat area. But we think at this point it would make sense to at least have that opportunity if it was something that was desired in the future. So we did meet on the property with the Fish and Game Club. The city's worked with the Fish and Game Club on this on the lake in the past, and they were involved most recently, I believe, with the accessible pier that's just off of Black Franks Drive there. So we did visit the site with them, and we did get support from the club for the 4 items that I mentioned here tonight. So again, it's just an information report for council in response to your question. The item is still scheduled to come forward to a public hearing, and I assume these items will be further discussed at the public hearing, with council ultimately making a determination after the close of the public hearing at third reading.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Do we need a motion to receive for discussion first?
It's not necessary, but you could if you wish.
Oh, sure. Motion to receive. Councillor Brennan, seconder Councillor Kipp, and I have Councillor Kipp, Thorpe, Fuller, Yoakum, and Beswick.
Yeah, thanks. Mine is just a question to the date of the report. Only the first page shows the February 2012 date. The rest of the report headings show February 2016. So on what is page 24 of the report of 52 shows the top shows 2012, and then the next page, or somewhere down farther, the city, City and Animal.
Habitat assessment, page 25.
Page 25, yeah. So.
I apologize, Your Worship. It appears that consultant just had a typo on the first page.
Thank you. That's it for me.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm understanding that we're just receiving this report for information tonight. Is that correct? Thank you. I have walked this area extensively before and since our last meeting when we discussed this, and I've read the report carefully, and in my opinion, the report makes great sense. My concern at the previous meeting was that we might lose any boat launch capability to the lake, and I believe, again, my opinion, that the Divers Lake Park Black Frank Drive option is the best one for a boat launch, and I would support that. And I'm really pleased to see the other recommendations in this report. So I have no problem with it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Yocum.
Thank you, Jerry. Dale, it's just a question I would have is when we make it a walk around the whole lake there, obviously quite smaller than Westwood, but it's out of curiosity, seeing the high usage and how much people enjoy the Westwood hike, how many kilometers around is this lake? Because it'd be a nice happy medium walk, looks like.
I would agree. I would have to guess it would probably be about 1.5 to 2 kilometers max.
Okay, so Westwood around about 6.7, so that's about 2K?
That's my guess.
Which would be a nice, what's that? 4?
Sorry, seems like more.
Okay, so it'd be a nice alternative for people as well. So great, thank you. It was just a question I had out of curiosity, Jerry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I'll postpone any further discussion until the public hearing, but when does this go to public hearing?
It was originally scheduled, Mr. Chairman, to go in the May public hearing. At this point, it looks like it'll be more likely coming forward on the June public hearing, so it'll be the first Thursday in June. I'm sorry, I don't have a calendar in front of me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
I was going to not say anything, and then I changed my mind. Could we put up page 32 for the public's benefit? I think this one is a better visual for people to realize where the trail and the concrete pad and the old dock were over to the left-hand side of the picture. This is the first I'm hearing that there actually used to be something there, which is totally amazes me. When we were talking about this the last 2 times it's come before us, it was never mentioned. And the report, now that we know it was 2016, actually recommends both options. So I'm curious to see what the public is going to say when this does come to public hearing. You know, if both options are affordable, there's no need to only be able to come in from one side. So, thanks.
Great. Thank you. Seeing no further questions, or no comments, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Passed. Thank you. And moving on, we eliminated the refugee. We are on Build Canada, Small Community Fund Grant Application. So I need a mover for the staff recommendation. Councillor Yocum. Second. And seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you. Community services. Community Program Grant Development Grant, Bowen Road Farmers Market Society. Move the recommendation, Councillor Bestwick. Seconder. Seconder, Councillor Kipp. Do we have any discussions? Is it? Oh, there is a delegation. Sorry. Mr. William King. Thank you. Hi, your name and address, please, for the record. Thank you.
My legal name is Mike Kennel King. I live at 415 Hillcrest. I go by Whelm King. Thanks for having me here today. I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet. I was one of the founders of the Bowen Road Farmers Market Society. I've sat on the board as the treasurer and secretary since its inception. We are a market that is run by farmers and for farmers. With me today, I have Larry Whaley, who is the president and founder of the Island Roots Co-op. I also have with me, though they had to leave early, our 2 market managers, Ben Gesselbrock, Ashta Cormier, as well as our current president, Chris Brown, who is a founder and farmer with the Farmship Growers Co-op. We started the Bowen Road Market with a clear objective to be a food-based market. There are other farmers markets in Nanaimo that are less food-based, and we have a very, very strong food and farmer focus. We're run by farmers, started by farmers. We have an incredibly high vendor satisfaction and customer satisfaction. Most of our customers view our market as a primary food source, not an auxiliary food source. We started the market in 2008. We were temporarily located at the Bowen Road Co-op. We moved shortly thereafter to Beban Park, and we've been there subsequently. For all the years that we've been there, we were renting the land via an honorarium to VIX. It was just a $500 stipend per year. This year, for the first year, we're dealing directly with parks, and subsequently our rates have gone notably up. It's also the first year that we are starting a second day of the week, so we're running 2 markets this year instead of just 1. Subsequently, our rates are about 400% what they've been in previous years, thus our request for a grant from Council today. Just a brief history of what's going on with our market. This year we formed a collaboration with the Island Roots Market, thus Mr. Whaley's attendance here today, to share their vision, the Island Roots vision of setting up a permanent year-round market space where local farmers, local food processors and producers can sell their products to a local market 365 days a year. This doesn't exist in Nanaimo. It barely exists anywhere in Canada in an indoor setting. There are outdoor year-round markets, but it's the Island Roots vision to have a year-round indoor market space that will allow access to locally produced foods. We feel this will become the hub for local food sustainability and will fit very well into Nanaimo's official community plan, of which a component is food security and food sustainability. And of course, it's hard to have that without a place to actually sell and buy local food products. So this year, in collaboration with Island Roots, we opted to start a second market day. We're normally just on Wednesdays. We are now on Saturdays as well. It's the first step in our long-term plan to have a year-round market. The theory behind it was simply to test the market. Is it there? Does the community want this beyond our one very successful day? And so we're moving over to 2 days. Our long-term plan, again, is an indoor, full-covered space that will be open 5 to 6 days a week, and we hope to bring this in under the Beban Master Plan. We are currently in advanced negotiations with other major players at Beban, including VIX, the Nanaimo Equestrian Association, as well as the IPPC, the Indigenous Peoples Place of Culture, formerly the Nanaimo Aboriginal Center, as well as secondary groups, the Boys and Girls Club, the Métis Nation, Nanaimo Food Share, and others, to form a joint proposal that we hope to bring before Council within the next few months as part of the Beban Master Plan that utilizes the space jointly for all of the major players that would like to use it that we know of. So we wanted to use this opportunity today to briefly introduce that concept that we hope to bring to you within the coming months. That's really all I have to say today. Again, I know staff has recommended our grant for $1,750, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. And we have a question from Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Much appreciate you coming. If I just understand what you indicated correctly, previously you leased or rented space for the day for $500 from Bank of Island Exhibition?
Correct.
And that was up until 2015, I'm guessing. And now in 2016, you're not dealing with BIX directly, you're dealing with Parks, Rec and Environment directly?
Correct.
For the same space or a different space?
Same space.
Same space. And did you say it's gone up 400% from what it was when BIX was charging you?
Yes, but that includes having 2 days a week. So effectively, we were paying a flat honorarium for the season of $500. And in 2016, that moves over with Parks to a daily rental fee. And so it more than doubled because of that. And then it doubled again because we added a second day of the week.
So it's gone up 200% for one day?
It's gone up a little more than 200% per day, and now we have 2 days, so 400% for us for the season.
So then essentially, for the same property, you are before us to ask for a grant to pay for the additional day of rent?
Correct, yes. I mean, had we been renting specifically from VIX, the ground that's used is not used for anything else during the period that it's used for. So had we been renting from VIX, we would have proposed a similar honorarium of $500 for this year. The land is simply fallow during the times that we don't use it.
Thank you. Then I have a question for staff.
Okay, we got Councillor Pratt next. So if you'd like to hold that. Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
That was my question. It will be in the same place, only you'll just have it 2 days a week. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Great. Councillor Yocum.
Not a question, just a quick comment, Mr. King. First of all, I'd like to thank you for coming forward, and definitely believe this wave of organic and markets and healthy foods is obviously the way we've got to go, and definitely admire what you guys are doing. The question I have is in regards, as you expand, I like when you say you look forward to expanding 5-6 days a week. Is there going to be educational components as well for youngsters and whatnot to, are you guys doing any programming down the road to learn about what you guys do and healthy foods and organic and programs as such, or is that down the road possibility? Just because I find this very interesting. I have a 6-year-old and a baby son as well, so I want to learn this stuff which wasn't really incorporated in my generation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to just comment. I am a new member of the Island Roots Board. I'm a founder of the Bowen Road Society, but I've just joined the Island Roots literally about a week ago, so I hesitate to speak too much for Island Roots, which has been planning for years, but I have said it on a few meetings, so I'll generally speak that would be an auxiliary program. Our primary objective is to have a space where local farmers can supply a local market 365 or close to that days per year. We would like to have an auxiliary capacity to have both educational purposes. This has come up in our meetings with the other groups who want to use Beban, as well as things like having local food processing capacities for people who want. So all of that's being talked about, but it's auxiliary to the primary purpose of simply being able to sell locally produced foods.
Great. Thank you. Seeing no further questions. Motion to receive? Or no?
There's a motion on the floor, so what I recommend is just unanimous consent. If anybody disagrees, they can say it now.
Great.
Otherwise, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. King.
Thanks, Council.
Councillor Bestwick has a question for staff.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. BIX site, it's not displayed, so this event has always happened there. It's not displacing anybody, so it's not in a sheet of ice, it's not a gym floor, it's not where somebody else is using it. And they've been successful in running this one-day event for a $500 stipend, I'm guessing, to BIX. Will the city be providing any more services for this event than what they've known to have received in the past for their $500?
No, at this time, it was an agreement between, or a meeting between the Bowen Road Market people, the VIX and myself, and in order to help expand the market, it was agreed between us that the city would take over the contracting of that space, which is in fact not part of the VIX lease. And so in doing so, what we have had to apply are the fees and charges through our parks bylaw. So that at $25 a day plus a cost for power resulted in the increase.
So I don't want to get into it for $1,750, but it seems to me like we're going to write them a check so they can write us a check back for the additional day. And we're giving them no more than they had before. They're getting the same thing. It just seems almost like an exercise of futility to me that we're going to write a check for $1,750 so they can give us one back for the same amount or a near amount and get the exact same thing they got before. And especially when we're trying to promote this type of activity for a gathering and for the goodness of what it is that they're bringing to the community in an outdoor space, just seems to be a little excessive to me and seems a little bit redundant to write a check for $1,750 to get it back. There's got to be a different way to me. I'd rather take that money because that money is a small fund, $8,000, that we have to offer grants such as this to deserving members of our community that may come forward. And here we are, we're going to use up this amount of that fund or that in order to provide somebody with the exact same as what they had, except for one more day on a piece of dirt. It doesn't make sense to me, but I'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Bestwick. Councillor Brennan?
Thank you. I guess on the first page of the report at the bottom, it says staff determined that this application met all the grant criteria. Can you just say what the grant criteria is?
The grant criteria is that the program be new or expanded in some way, that it's intended to be a one-time grant to help establish a program in the community. There are several other criteria, that it be a nonprofit, that it have large community benefit, but essentially in this case it was that the program was expanding.
And at one time, it's a one-time grant. They can't come back next year.
That is the intention of the program. The market may expand again, which may in fact qualify it again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan. No further questions. I think we have the motion. So all those in favor? Thank you. We're skipping the bylaw 9A, right?
No, Chair, that's for a different bylaw, so you could consider this one this evening.
Oh, okay. So different bylaw. 9A, can I have a mover, please? For parcel tax. Yeah. This is the parcel tax roll preparation bylaw 2016, number 7229, to provide authorization to produce the parcel tax roll be adopted.
They're completely different bylaws. This one is to actually just prepare the roll, and the other one's all the details. So this one could go forward this evening.
Okay. So I move Councillor Kipp. And a seconder, Councillor Thorpe. Seeing no speakers, let's call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Correspondence? Do we have any? None? No notice of motions. Nothing in other business. Now we have delegations not related to council. We have two, Mr. Hold'em Southward and Mr. Paul Manley. Mr. Southward.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Your name and address for the record, please.
Holden Southward, 848 Inez Place, Nanaimo.
Thank you. Proceed.
Good. Yes. So, in becoming a self-reliant and semi-autonomous municipality is a long project. It have to come in, slow steps, and the reason for doing it is because we're under a soft globalist takeover. We're losing our ownership, our autonomy, like through the TPP and other measures. We're losing our distinctiveness. We're losing our fabric of society. This is all, it's partially our fault too, and also the policies of allowing foreigners, outsiders, for buying up our real estate, competing with our real estate for so many years has jacked up the price. Like in Vancouver, it's just unbelievable. Like 25 years ago, a friend came to me and asked, "Oh yeah, come with me. We can start buying houses together. We can start making some money." And I said, "No, I don't believe in that. I don't want to be part of the problem. Part of the problem is not having your own place, your right to stay somewhere. But part of the problem is being part of the competition. That's only going to force the next generations to consecutively go unnecessarily in more and more debt to give the previous investors a windfall." Of course, the world banks love this. And through the cycles the small banks get sucked in to keep themselves validated in business, so they give out riskier loans. And the world banks love this. So when the next crash comes, they go bankrupt, the banks get bigger, they start merging in, and they just keep on getting bigger. So this whole cycle of debt and competition, our dysfunction as a society to live and share the land and work together synergistically is to their advantage. They've engineered it, It's also our fault for our dysfunction and our negligence. So we've, in a way, have become a somewhat sociopathic society, step by step, slowly but surely. Anything you practice, you get better and better at it every single time. So anyway, I'll just, there's no way I'll be able to say everything I have to in the next 10 minutes, but to strive to become a self-reliant, totally self-owned municipality means we are true patriots. Patriots meaning we value something beyond ourselves that unites us as a people with a history that gives us distinction. Patriots meaning we put others first in our service and put good providence into action when it comes to the future of our children. If we value our children's future, this means it is moral not to allow outsiders to take ownership of our real estate businesses in any way, shape, or form. We are under a soft globalist takeover. Mergers and acquisitions are speeding up at breakneck speeds because of ultra-cheap interest rates. Right before, it used to be the velocity of money, liquid money, that kept the economy going. But now, unfortunately, it's the velocity of debt right now. So we're kind of coming to an end. Soon, the debt of the nations is going to come to a point where nobody's going to want it. They're not going to buy it. And it won't be serviced, even if it's at 0% interest rates. So things are going to change. Hopefully it's a slow change, transition. It's nothing that has to be overnight. But becoming self-reliant means that we have to start from the ground up. And it's really nice because that the RDN has the plan for agricultural development. And what I'll do is I'll just quote off your Bible just to remind you. Sometimes, I was quite surprised because this doesn't sound like Agenda 21 globalist, which is to make us all dependent, living in little city-states and our food grown overseas and stuff like this. They love that. And somehow that's going to make global warming go away. And I think global warming might be a little bit of a hoax just to get tax or carbon taxes and global governments that will continually, eternally validate their positions, no doubt. But anyway, so I'll just list it off quickly. In the Regional District Nanaimo Agricultural Plan, Chapter 4, there's just 8 simple points, and I was kind of surprised. It says, protect and enhance the agricultural land base in RDN. Number 2, strengthen local agriculture and aquaculture economy. Number 3, improve training skills and labor opportunities in the RDN. Number 4, improve opportunities for on-farm water resource management. Number 5, address environmental sustainability, wildlife, and climate change challenges in the RDN. Number 6, promote awareness and value of local agriculture and aquaculture. Number 7, support agriculture and aquaculture in land use, regulations, and policies. And number 8, consider agriculture in emergency planning initiatives. So this is where I'll start off with the next step. You have to aggressively, obviously preserve and expand on agriculture, but also number 8 is so important because you can't just, this says emergency could be a cataclysmic event, which is small. More likely, it's going to be some major global war or big depression. People survived mainly in the Great Depression because they were primarily an agrarian society. They grew their own food, and when people were out, they had enough soup, kitchens to feed the rest. Still, people suffered and they went hungry and they died, but still they survived. Right now, if any of those events happen, most of the people in Vancouver Island are going to be dead. So there's not going to be enough time to suddenly start springing forth from the land food. So the best measure is to actually make money by having a food store. And the easiest way you can do that is actually having, in different parts of the city, have a partnership with businesses, patriots, that have excess land, to have grain towers of different types of grain, huge, and maybe 2 three different places. But at the same time, you can make money and have a bit of a rotation of the product by having a mill and also large bakeries, which you can supply the grocery stores, sell at the store, and supply the island. So this would be the first initiative, because there's no way you can suddenly grow enough food if you don't have enough supply. It's going to be chaos. That way, food could be distributed. You'd have a chance of, bread and whatever else you'd be able to store to feed the populace. It would be like these 3 giant soup kitchens or distributions. Or especially you can supply the grocery stores. I mean, at least that there's something, a meal or two people could eat. And if the fabric of society was strong enough, we could survive. If not, it's not going to work. So we'd have a chance there. And the second thing is to really try to bring our industries back, because it is moral to make our own clothes, to make our own shoes, to make our own tools, because you have to think, we're getting all these cheap products. And why? It's been engineered. And why? It's because hundreds of millions of people were forcefully over the years, through other countries like China and such, through their policies of eminent domain, moving people off their lands they were on there for so many generations into crowded, polluted cities to work long hours in factories and sweatshops for practically nothing. That's why you can go down and buy, a saw, for so cheaper than you could 20 years ago. And they're devaluing the yuan because they're trying to keep their sales going up, but the global economy is slowing down. And this is causing great problems. So these people thinking that we're, they're entering the 21st century, they made their lives better. I think they're much happier just, even if, all I want to do is grow food. I'd be happy if I found a girl I loved when I was 16 who was just barefoot and just grew food. And, you don't need much to be happy. But this whole idea that, we're supposed to be evolving as a species is actually false. We're actually de-evolving, becoming less human. It's the whole, goal in life is to discover what it is to be human and our best self. And not to think that the human is inferior. We're the one who's inferior. It's not the human. We're to blame. So, anyway, going on with that, I just wrote this one right now because I had like a 3-hour sermon. I was trying to condense in 10 minutes. It's like
you got 3 seconds.
Well, how about this? I think you guys got the gist there. It's an introduction. I'll come now and then. I have another plan how we can actually become autonomous, where you have the right to become autonomous and actually have certain rights where we don't even have we're not under judicial tyranny. We can start to define our own societies. Native lands could even be expanded 3 times, and so they can become even more self-reliant. The stronger they are, they revive their culture, their connection. Because you have to understand, part of the plan, the globalist plan, is in destroying culture means that when we lose that, we lose part of ourselves. To discover being a human and our best self cannot be done in one lifetime, but as a connection to the traditions of the past and through the legacy and the wisdom of the living of our ancestors and immediate family. Then we can find ourselves. Then, otherwise, it's we're rather stunted. We're only part of the puzzle. But together we can make a beautiful picture. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, but thank you very much.
I don't see any questions for you. Thank you very much, sir. Motion to receive the delegation.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Brennan. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next delegation is Mr. Paul Manley. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for taking the time and the patience to hear this presentation. I'm going to start off, I'm here as a private citizen, as an individual, but my experience with trade and investment goes back a decade. I was on the National Board of the Council of Canadians, which is Canada's largest citizens advocacy organization, and I was on the trade committee for that organization, and they've been looking at trade issues since the first free trade agreement with the United States. I'm also the trade and investment critic for the Green Party of Canada, and as a filmmaker, I made a film about the Security and Prosperity Partnership, the SPP, in 2007. When I was making that film, I learned something about what all these acronyms, these trade acronyms, have in common. NAFTA, CAFTA, FIPA, SPP, TPP, TTIP, CETA. They all have an agenda in common, and the common denominator for all of these, they have different chapters and different things, but they're the investment chapter and the corporate rights that are given to corporations in these chapters that allow foreign corporations to sue governments for laws and policies that get in the way of their profitability. These chapters were initially brought in through Chapter 11 of NAFTA. That was the first one. When I was making my film on the SPP, there was about $17 million worth of lawsuits against Canada that had been lost, mostly environmental issues. Since that time, we have paid out $170 million in lawsuits, and there's been a recent decision on the Bilcon case in Nova Scotia for $300 million pending to pay to an American corporation. And there are $6 billion worth of lawsuits on the books against Canada right now. So this has blossomed. Back when I made the film in 2007, when I started doing this research, there was, a couple of dozen $1 million on the books for these kind of lawsuits. This is, a blossoming thing. These are all the free trade agreements that are now in force or in process with Canada, and they all have investor state provisions. FIPAs, Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Agreements, have investor state provisions as well. Nobody cared about those until we signed one with China. People weren't worried about Armenia or Zambia corporations suing us for our laws and policies. It was mostly Canadian corporations that were going down and bullying third world countries. And the current film I'm working on is about investor state dispute settlements. These are FIPAs that are in process, that are being signed and being worked on. One of the film case studies that I've done is about El Salvador, where a Canadian corporation is going down and suing the government of El Salvador for $300 million for the loss of potential profit because they wanted to put a mine at the headwaters of the river that feeds, provides water to 60% of the population. It's immoral. It's wrong. The governments have decided that they don't want this mine there. They've seen how this mining can contaminate rivers, and so they've decided they don't want it. So what are the things that these agreements protect? These are the key things, clauses in the investor state chapters. National treatment, most favored nation treatment, prohibition on performance requirements, examples like local content and minimum processing. Minimum standards of treatment, fair and equitable treatment. It's a very expansive definition. Expropriation, direct and indirect. Indirect expropriation is when you, a council, pass a bylaw that stops a corporation from doing a process. Say somebody comes up with a proposal at the anything goes zoning out at Duke Point, and council decides that you don't really want that. You change the zoning there, that's indirect expropriation, and you could trigger an investor state dispute for the loss of potential profit for the lifetime of that project. That's what this means. And it's the right to compensation at fair market value. These tools are being used as offensive tools. Now they're about deregulation, and they are being used to stop levels of government from enacting good legislation. And a prime example of this is Philip Morris is suing any country that wants plain packaging on cigarette packs. So they've attacked Australia, They've attacked Uruguay. They've gone after Togo. This is a corporation with $84 million in annual sales. They're going after a country with a GDP of $4 billion. $84 billion in annual sales is what Philip Morris has, and they're going after a country with $4 billion in GDP because they want to protect their citizens. ISD arbitration, it's their secretive trade tribunals. 3 lawyers get together in a back room. They're not paid by government. There's no tenure, no body of established law, no permanent court or location. There's a conflict of interest because these lawyers switch positions. One arbitration, the lawyer could be the arbitrator. The next he could be representing the corporation. The next he could be representing the government. And they all just switch around. They get paid $1,000 a day, an hour minimum. It's a racket. And huge damages are paid out by government. So there's no appeal process. The CETA agreement, they've just asked to have that in there. This is for corporations only. Governments cannot sue corporations. As I was saying, this is a growing industry. Fees of $1,000 an hour, and it's an insider's game. There's some really important cases. This is a long presentation that I've done, and I could explain a number of these cases to you over a number of hours because I've done a ton of research on this. Canada has been sued much more than any other country under NAFTA, and currently we have $6 billion worth of lawsuits that we're facing. Do we need investor-state dispute settlements? We do not. We are an established democratic society. We have an established and advanced judicial system, and we should have our courts deciding on trade disputes. And if we're trading with partners that don't have democratic societies or robust, fair judicial systems, then part of the deal should be that they improve their judicial systems. There's a lot of fight back on this stuff. There's a case on fracking in Quebec. Quebec trying to protect their water. They're getting sued for $250 million, the Canadian government. This is an interesting case because Bilcon wanted to build a huge quarry in Digby Neck in Nova Scotia. They failed the federal provincial joint environmental assessment because of species at risk, the right whale. The project was contrary to community core values. What are our values here in Nanaimo? What are our core values? Well, the core values, putting that in the arbitration, putting that in the appeal process, the environmental assessment, is one of the things that kicked this arbitration into gear. And Bilcon won, and they're seeking $300 million in damage for the loss of potential profit. They haven't done any work. They want money for not doing anything. And that's what these agreements are all about, paying corporations to do nothing. So the Trans-Pacific Partnership, there's 12 countries that have joined into this. It was done in secret. It's a 6,000-page document with 30 chapters, only 4 of which have to do with trade. The rest of them are about non-tariff barriers and specifically to constrain governments and citizens, what we can do. Again, it was negotiated in secret. We cannot see the negotiating documents for another 4 years. There's a bunch of the chapters. It contains investor-state dispute settlements. It is worse than NAFTA, and this is where it's important to this municipality. Under Chapter 9, the investment chapter, 9.2, under scope, a party's obligation under this chapter shall apply to measures adopted or maintained by A, the central, regional, or local governments or authorities of that party. NAFTA does not mention local governments. The TPP mentions local governments. Chapter 10, cross-border trade and services. Article 10.1, definitions, measures adopted or maintained by a party means measures adopted or maintained by central, regional, or local governments or authorities. The TPP will restrict the ability of our local government to encourage economic growth by procuring services from local companies. That means that local companies will have to bid against companies in Vietnam or Brunei where labor standards are very low, where there's no human rights, where there's no ability to organize labor. So it's a serious matter. I got all this other analysis on other chapters, but what I'm asking you to do is to ask the federal government not to ratify the TPP, and I've sent you several examples of resolutions. New York City is a TPP-free zone. They have passed a resolution that says they will not abide by the TPP, and they've ask Congress not to sign it. San Francisco, Seattle, a whole array of cities in the States. And in Ontario, there are becoming a number of communities with auto manufacturing that are opposing this as well, because they've changed the rules of origin, which means that a car with only 45% parts made in Canada can now be called made in Canada. The other 55% could be made anywhere else in the world, including China. That is a recipe for offshoring. That's a recipe for coming and just taking resources out of this country and losing jobs. But it's a recipe for undermining the democratic authority of this council. Your democratic authority is being undermined by this agreement, and I think it's incumbent upon this municipality and this council and municipalities across Canada to stand up and tell the federal government that you should have the authority to make decisions for the people that elect you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan. Ladies and gentlemen. Councillor Brennan.
I was waiting for Paul to... Paul, thank you very much. I really appreciate the information, and I appreciate your emails today and et cetera. I'm just wondering if you know if the Federation of Community Municipalities has looked at this question on behalf of municipalities, and if they've taken any position or issued any reports or...
I think that it's in front of them right now, and I think that any kind of nudging and pushing that they get will be helpful.
Okay.
I know that there was a resolution brought to Vancouver City Council, and it was referred to staff, and I think that it's gone on to committee that works with FCM.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Paul, each time you come to us, you always bring great information and knowledge beyond what I anticipate to come forward every time. So thank you so much for that. There's two things for me. Is the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, not to ratify that agreement or express our thoughts on that to the federal government. And two, I think embedded in there is to a bylaw that we would enact to protect our municipality from potential litigation for the very reasons that you outlined. Is that fair to say? Like there's really two suggestions. There's one request.
Yes.
But a strong suggestion that we also have created a bylaw for the municipality to protect.
That's what New York City's done. It's created an ordinance saying we are a TPP-free zone. The problem with that is that it really has no teeth. These agreements are far-reaching and go beyond, your powers as a municipality. Your defense really is to tell the federal government that you don't want it, and for citizens and for governments to stand up for our democratic authority, for our democratic rights. Because once, the agreement has been signed, and once it has been ratified by 80% of the economics, by the countries that represent 80% of the economies in the TPP, then it's really beyond the control of governments. It goes into this international system which is not democratic, which is not responsive to citizens, and it's international law. It's really problematic.
Thank you. I concur with Councillor Brennan about the FCM, the UBCM, and so on and so forth, and every other smaller agency beneath FCM, UBCM, AVICC, and the rest. But when does this go to the federal government for ratification? Like, when does it go before them, like officially?
Well, they have 2 years for ratification. The agreement was signed in February 4th. And so all the countries that have signed on have 2 years to ratify. And right now, the federal government is in the process of public hearings. And I applied to speak at the public hearing on April 18th in Vancouver, and was rejected as a speaker along with 175 other people, many of whom have looked at these agreements or have experience with how these agreements have affected communities in other places. And so the public hearing process seems to be more like a public listening process. And I think that there's not enough public education about what this agreement means, what the investor state provisions in this agreement mean, and how they're going to affect us. And it's really problematic. And I think, in terms of bylaws and protecting, you've heard me come before you before and say this is the reason why I think we need to own the watershed as a public watershed, because who knows what foreign corporations going to come in there later on and find loopholes in our regulations to do as they please. And it's the same with what we have at Duke Point. Do we want to have some specific say in what kind of industry comes into this town, or do we want to be in a position where we're trying to battle back? And the problem with these agreements is that, yes, the municipality could say, we're a TPP-free zone, but when it comes to transfer payments from the province and the federal government, if we've created a huge multi-million-dollar or billion-dollar arbitration payout to a corporation for not doing something in our community that nobody in this community wants, those are tax dollars. Those are tax dollars that we're paying foreign corporations to not do things. It's a huge sledgehammer. And it's a huge sledgehammer against your decision-making process to know that you could be triggering hundreds of millions of dollars in payouts to a foreign corporation for standing up for the citizens.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. So it's good to see you, but also always have some wisdom for myself every time we connect. And in regards to the TPP, when was it implemented? Was it the Conservative government?
The negotiation process started in 2008 without Canada. The Harper federal government entered the negotiations in 2011, and they had to accept everything that had been agreed to up to that point. So it put Canada in a very weak negotiating position.
May I interrupt on this just quickly? Why did we accept? If we weren't even at the table?
Those are really good questions. I don't understand what is in it for us as a country, and citizens around the world are saying the same thing. We don't understand what's in it for us. These are corporate rights agreements. They're about giving extra powers to corporations. The idea is that we're going to reduce tariffs and trade barriers. We already have trade agreements with most of the countries, half the countries in the TPP. We already do business with almost all of them, and we do a booming business with them. There are some tariffs in the way for countries that use really low labor to flood the market with cheap products. So, for example, we have tariffs on Chinese solar panels because they've been flooding the market with solar panels, so there's a huge tariff on those. But we have a system in place, the General Agreement on Trades and Tariff that the whole world has signed on to.
So
we don't need to be doing this, the WTO process.
So, Mr. Mayor, just quickly. So what's after the recent election in the fall, what's the present-day federal government's position on this? And then secondly, I'd like to educate myself more. That's why I wish we were in that SARC room. We could have a meeting on this because I never heard of this, and I don't want corporations dictating what happens here in Nanaimo, Duke Point. I was thinking about the watershed already, Duke Point. Any corporation come sue us and say we could have made this amount of money here and we could get sued, and you're blocking it. So sorry, I rambled on there. So where's the federal position on this today? And I would love to go more down this avenue because I do not want to be dictated by corporations like our province. Anyways, yeah.
So the provincial government inherited the negotiated deal. On February 4th, the arrangement was for all of the parties to sign the agreement. We were the only country with a new government in place since the negotiations ended in Atlanta in last fall. So Chrystia Freeland signed the agreement and said, that doesn't mean that we're going to ratify it. It just means that we're still in the game. But the agreement cannot be changed. There is no renegotiation of the agreement. It is an as-is document, so none of it can be changed. So they're doing this public process. It feels to me like they want to do it. But it also feels to me that if there's enough pushback and understanding about what this agreement means and what it will do to our democratic authority and our ability to legislate on the behalf of citizens, that they will back down. There's a huge fight against this in the United States right now. People think that Donald Trump is big because he's going to build a wall. His number one campaign speech, the first thing he talks about is trade. Bernie Sanders, it's the same thing. So on both sides of the spectrum, they've got a huge following of people who are fed up with these trade agreements. They're fed up because NAFTA did not promise the jobs that it was supposed to, that it has hollowed out the American economy, it has gutted their manufacturing base, the jobs moved down to Mexico, and now those jobs in Mexico are going to be moving to Vietnam. Because if you give the corporations an open playing field to move their pieces and pawns wherever they want, they're going to extract resources where there's resources in Canada. They're going to move those resources to where there's cheap labor and low labor standards. And, the labor chapter says that the countries must adhere to International Labor Organization standards. But those standards don't say that Brunei and Vietnam have to set a minimum wage at any amount. They just say you have to have a minimum wage. That could be pennies an hour. That's a minimum wage. That's all that the ILO says that they have to do, is have a minimum wage. It doesn't say what it needs to be. And Brunei is a country where they stone people for being homosexuals. These, countries are undemocratic. They don't allow people to organize labor, and you have basically indentured slaves creating products there with our resources instead of having a manufacturing base right here in Canada. We want cheap goods. They're made cheaply, and they last, very short periods of time before they're off to our recycling depot or our landfill. There's something wrong with that process as well. So if this is the kind of world we want, this is the kind of world that the TPP is building for us.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Oakland? Councillor Fuller.
Thanks, Paul, for coming again. You always enlighten us, and as a community, I think we are the better for having you come before us. I do not envy communities that don't have someone like you that's willing to go out and do the work on these types of things and bring it to your municipality, not just to educate council, but to educate the public, because the video of this meeting can go all over the place and educate far more people than are sitting in the audience, which is a pretty good number for a community. Now, it's been mentioned that this is going to the FCM this year, which seems to me would give a lot of time if the FCM does approve sending something to the federal government. But would you agree that it would make far more sense not just to have that, but to have municipalities as individual municipalities do the same and send those letters? You sent a copy of one that Vancouver is looking at, a motion they're looking at making, which makes perfect sense to me that we make this same motion and send that as our request as well, and that the FCM do it as well. And the more communities that do it, the more likely the Liberal government would be willing not to ratify this.
Yeah, I think that's the purpose of me being here. I'm not sure what the whole FCM process is right now. I just heard that it's in a committee process. So, how it comes forward. When it comes forward, the delegates that go from Nanaimo to the FCM, I want you to be aware and educated about what it is that you're debating, what you're talking about, and to have a good basis of understanding about how this is going to work. And I think that it's incumbent upon councils across this country to have that understanding, know what you're voting on.
And I totally agree with you, and I would like to see us as a council look further into this to do something such as what Vancouver is doing, and I'd like to know how to do that. Would I be making a motion, a notice motion? How can we go about getting more, doing what Vancouver is doing, or at least contemplating doing it?
We could put it under business arising from the delegations, and you could bring something forward at that time. Councillor Pratt.
Mr. Manley, thank you for coming this evening. There's an awful lot of food for thought here, and you've certainly given us a lot of information and new information, other than your email this afternoon that I read. I think the FCM is the place where this is going to end up emanating from, if it's going to be a wave across Canada that's going to end up at the federal government, because that is the advocacy body for municipalities. I imagine the UBCM as well should be looking at this and doing something provincially, each province could certainly do something provincially that could go to the FCM. It'll be really interesting to see what they have to say at the FCM in June, which I will be attending along with 3 other people from council. It doesn't look like a good deal. Not a good deal at all. And so I guess we do need to educate ourselves a lot more than we have. Some of these things are very concerning. I'm wondering, is there any petitions out there that have started up that you're aware of? Because you often...
There are a number of them, yeah.
Online? Yeah.
There's I think, direct petitions to the House of Commons.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you were to Google TP, what is it? TPC?
IP, that's another one that's
TPP. There we go. Yeah. Oh, I see. www. Let's talk TPP. I think we do need to get more educated on this. I mean, this is very concerning what you've said. I can't even see why a government would enter into something like that sets itself up for that kind of litigation from other countries coming back at us, or even us going to other countries and doing the same thing, which I find just as concerning as the other way around. There has to be a heck of a lot of money involved if they're willing to put themselves at risk of that kind of litigation. So it's a hard thing to wrap our minds around right now. I think starting by, our staff may be trying to find out from Vancouver what they're doing and maybe what other municipalities in BC are doing, if anybody's doing anything. That's the kind of thing we're going to have to look at. But you've woken us up to this whole thing now. I don't think we can just sit here and ignore it. So I think it's important for us to look a little further into it, a whole lot further into it. I really want to thank you for coming tonight. This has been really interesting and disturbing.
The whole process, like the negotiations are secretive, and there's corporate interests at the table. When I did the research on the Security and Prosperity Partnership, there was 20 corporations that represented Canada in that negotiation. And the list of those corporations included Home Depot Canada, Walmart Canada, Chevron Canada, Ford Canada. Sound like great Canadian companies to you? So you got to wonder how they were representing Canada and what were their interests in defending the citizens of Canada in those negotiations. And we know it's this, it's the same bunch of big multinationals that are involved in the TPP negotiation process. And that's the key problem with this. I'm not opposed to trade. I want fair trade. I'm not opposed to harmonizing regulations if those regulations are going up so that other people that are making goods for me in other countries are being treated fairly, so that they live in an environment that's not being destroyed to make those products. And I want to make sure that businesses here have the same opportunities to compete in a fair marketplace and pay their employees fairly and take care of the environment that we live in and not have to compete against countries that do not respect labor or environmental standards.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thanks. Paul, could you, not to add to your evening schedules, but could you make arrangements to make the same presentation at the regional district level? That would, because there's other mayors there in attendance, there's other EA directors, there's the chair, they'll be going to FCM as well. Sure. So I think it's so invaluable. If you could do that, I think it would be appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Again, enlightening as always. April 9th, 2013, this council voted to be left out of CETA. I believe we brought that motion through from the Council of Canadians. Over 40 municipalities and school boards at that time. And what we're talking about is ethical trade and ethical business and corporate social responsibility. The previous speaker spoke about it. Instead of saying FIPA, we should talk about what the name is. That's this Foreign Investment Protection Agreement. And that's more important than using that acronym, I think. So sustainability, addressing the negative effects of globalization is what we're really talking. The real negative, there's positive effects to globalization. That means that if we share our wealth, that people will have water and will have food and will have access to healthy things. That's the good parts of globalization if it becomes ethical. So what we can do is put this motion forward to staff and ask them for a review of the Vancouver motions and come back with something, because I know in Germany, 2014 October, there was hundreds of thousands of people protesting the Canadian-European Trade Agreement. Hundreds of thousands. And it just happened again this last week in Berlin. Hundreds of thousands of people protesting. It's not a good agreement for anybody but the corporation. It's not good for the people. They're complaining about it in Germany too. So, and my fear is that instead of bringing the world up in globalization, we're taking it backwards to poor environmental qualities. Unlike I say the previous speaker said, we're trying to get a good farming act going at the regional district, and by creating local laws, we can be sued, and that's the thing that bothers me the most. So, appreciate your input. Thank you.
Thank you. Just quickly, I just hope this is going to the wayside. I'm just reading an article I just forwarded you guys, and it's absolutely, Paul, this is absurd. I'm really ashamed I'm not more intuitive of this, but it does affect us. Thank you for bringing awareness. And this is one line here in this one article in Winnipeg Free Press calls it NAFTA on steroids. That's what this writer says. It goes on. It goes, it's so ridiculous, basically stating that this part of this agreement is investor-state dispute settlement provisions, basically is saying that it's like TransCanada suing the Obama administration because he rejects the pipeline.
For $15 billion.
Right there, exactly. I can go on and on. We get the point, so I hope this council doesn't go to the wayside, and I would be proud to take a position as New York and San Francisco an important cause as such. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul, for your presentation. I know one thing that kind of stuck out in my mind when we talk about trade and free trade is the liquor industry right now that Christy Clark has set out agreed to with the BC VQA. Now, one important thing is when you're limiting trade to a certain specific wine in a grocery store and eliminating others for a fair market, you are violating NAFTA as far as I'm concerned. But she says otherwise. So these agreements, I think it's just the tip of the iceberg for us. I think we need a lot more information on what is happening because everybody knows Stippets. Like I said, you've researched it. for us, we've just heard about it from you. So there's a lot of information out there that we should look at. And I think a staff report on what we can do, like, can we do anything? Is this waste of staff resources? Like, what has Vancouver done? How much time did they spend? Do we need to focus on other things? How is it of value? Well, we get that there's things that we can't control. We can always have a voice, and I think that's why we have UBCM, FCM, AVI, CC, and all these as a collective. And, you know, this might be the start for us to do it and carrying it forward. And I think that's important for us to do. But I think for the information that we need, we should get it first. I think that's a key issue. Like, I don't know how this affects us. Like in Inukjuit, if they're selling the little submarines, that we don't do this, and now we've eliminated them from the entire world economy. Well, what does that do to that company? How does TPP affect that with NAFTA? So there's a lot of information on there, positive and negative, that we don't know how it affects us. And the companies that are here and what they're trying to do, because I have no idea what they're trying to do. Like you said, it's all in secret.
Inukjuit can trade with the world as they wish without having any of these kind of agreements in place. You know, unless a country puts tariffs in the way, but part of actually what the TPP has in the intellectual property chapter puts companies like Inukjuit at a disadvantage, because it locks in copyright provisions and intellectual property for a much longer time period and makes it harder for innovators to use technology or ideas that have come before them and innovate and change those ideas. Humans are great innovators, but they've always picked up ideas from other places.
Yeah.
And, made new things out of old ideas. And the TPP, the IP chapter, Jim Balsillie, the founder of BlackBerry, says it's a huge problem for Canadian innovation. So, do a little Google search on Jim Balsillie, founder of BlackBerry, and hear what he has to say about the TPP and the intellectual property and copyright chapters in it. And you'll be astounded. There's a whole long read there. The thing about this agreement, like I said, it's 6,000 pages long. It's 30 chapters. Each one of those chapters, you need experts in those areas, in those fields of study, to be able to parse the language and fully understand. And you need lawyers to sit there and parse these soft-looking phrases to understand what those mean. Nobody, was thinking that indirect expropriation was going to lead to $15 billion lawsuits against the U.S. government for blocking Keystone XL because they want to mitigate climate change. But that's what it's being used for, that term, indirect expropriation. It's in all of these agreements, and it's being used like a huge sledgehammer to push back on any legislation that stops governments from doing things like the Ontario government had a feed-in tariff system. They wanted a local industry for solar and wind manufacturing, and they gave companies a break on the feed-in tariff. It was ruled as out of order under these trade agreements as an unfair advantage, and they had to pull it. India was doing the same thing, trying to build a solar industry and get rid of their coal-fired generators and replace them with wind and solar with their own manufacturing. So, yeah, I've told you before I could go on for quite a while. I've been researching this. I've been reading academic papers. I've been reading agreements. I have a copy of NAFTA at home. It's this thick. And I thank you for indulging me the time. And I hope that you will consider passing the motion, because it is a gesture. Mm-hmm. It is a voice. It is a way of saying that this is wrong and you want a better process. We're going to have international trade. Let's do it publicly.
One more speaker, Councillor.
I would move that we accept the delegation.
There's no other questions for the delegation. Call a question.
Is a seconder?
Okay. Seconded by Councillor. All's in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And then I would like to thank you.
Business arising from the delegation.
Yes. Just listening to each of us speak. I'm not sure that we have a meeting of minds on this. I think that having a council resolution and a UBCM resolution and FCM resolution would be the best. Course of action for us. I would not like to see a motion, the one that we have here, expressing our opposition fail. I would not like to see that fail. I've heard opinion around the table that we want to take some time and get some additional information. On the other hand, we are going to the FCM. I'm talking before I make a motion. So I'm going to make a motion that Nanaimo Mayor and Council express its opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement and communicate this to Prime Minister Trudeau, Cabinet Ministers, and every Member of Parliament.
Seconded by Councillor Fuller.
Then I will speak to it.
Okay.
It seems to me that we need as individuals to take a position on this, and we need to take a position on it as a council. I think that Mr. Manley gave us a great presentation, but it is a huge, obviously, I mean, from listening to him speak, every angle that we looked at, he had a huge amount of information on. We don't have that kind of information. And so I'm a little torn on this, whether we should go ahead and pass this motion or take this motion and refer it off to staff for a report back. I will let you guys decide on that, but I think that time is of the essence, and if we're going to go to the FCM in a month, prepared to comment on this, then we should have the information prior to going. So
Thank you.
I'll listen to others.
Councillor Fuller.
I agree that time is of the essence, and I'm willing to support the motion. I would like to see it pass rather than having, it drag on and drag on. I think the FCM is good, but the more municipalities that would do something like Nanaimo, that would do something like Vancouver, and hopefully other communities across Canada would have far bigger impact together as opposed to just the FCM.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
I agree with both Councillor Brennan and Councillor Fuller. I think it would be, I would support the motion. I would definitely support this motion. I don't think there's anything wrong with passing a motion like that. We've certainly, although we have, this is the first time we've really had to take this in, it's pretty clear that there are some huge issues here that need to be looked at. So in passing a motion like this doesn't mean we still can't gather a lot more information on what other people are doing and still state ourselves that we're in agreement with the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would not vote against the motion, but I will admit that I'm not entirely comfortable with proceeding this quickly just on the basis of one presentation tonight. As good as it was and as impressive as it was, I personally would prefer to get more information to find out what, for example, Vancouver staff discovered and have our staff report back on that. I don't see that there is a crucial time constraint here. So my preference would be to take a little bit more care before we proceed. Having said that, I wouldn't vote against this motion. I'm not sure where that leaves me.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, can we have the motion, please?
Well, I was going to actually ask Councillor Brennan to read it back so we got it all. However, prior to doing so, I'm just wondering if Council would be interested in maybe adding a line to the end of it. So it would read something along the lines of that the City of Nanaimo Mayor and Council expresses opposition to the ratification of the TPP agreement and communicate this position to the Government of Canada, and direct staff to review it and provide an introductory and options report regarding the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreements, including recent Vancouver motions. So it would tie the two together. Do you want to read that again?
No, I think we got it.
Got it.
Everybody got it? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So, last item on the agenda is question period. Agenda items only.
Move adjournment.
Move adjournment. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Nope.